I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. Today is Tuesday, November 26th. Thank you all for being here tonight on this Tuesday before the Thanksgiving holiday. On behalf of the board, I'd like to thank our students for their hard work, our teachers, administrators, and staff for all they do for our students, and our community for the opportunity to serve. I'd also like to thank my fellow board members for all of the time and effort that they put into this work. That's Joanna Walsh, David Brown, Greg Grambling, who's not here, Katie Lublin, Dennis Maroney, Robin Nelson, Sarah Parent, who's with us on Zoom, and John Cini, who will be here in a few minutes. We have a couple of meaty topics this evening. We'll be doing our annual review of special education, talking about some possible new initiatives for the next budget year, and end with budget guidance for the upcoming fiscal year. Our budget process is crucial to the successful operation of our school district. It involves a series of steps, each with a specific purpose and timeline. Last week, we heard the overall tax strategy for all operating boards from our fiscal authority, the Board of Finance. This information is essential as it provides us with a clear understanding of the district's financial constraints and opportunities. With this information, we can make informed decisions about the budget. We also heard them ask each of the boards to review existing programs, thoroughly vet new programs, and consider the overall budgetary and taxation impact of spending decisions. We were asked to thoroughly consider opportunities for efficiencies, to ensure all resources are utilized to the fullest extent, and to explore alternatives such as insourcing or outsourcing. Lastly, we were advised that all anticipated capital projects should come forward as part of the budget process, not separately. Our transportation initiative, where we brought the rest of our special education transportation infrastructure in-house, is a great example of seeking efficiencies and alternate forms of delivery. Thank you for all of that work, Rich, and your team. Shirley, too. Now that we have tax guidance, tonight we'll provide our own budget guidance to the superintendent, again, near the end of the meeting. This guidance will include key priorities, financial parameters, and areas where we expect to see growth or reduction in spending. The superintendent and their team will then develop a detailed budget proposal based on this guidance. In January and February, we will review the detailed budget proposal. During this time, we'll also provide opportunities for public input and feedback. This input is invaluable as it helps us understand the needs and priorities of our community. Ultimately, we'll vote on a budget that strikes the optimal balance between providing the best services to our students and operating efficiently. This requires careful consideration of various factors, including educational priorities, financial constraints, and community needs. Sometimes this requires us to make very hard choices. Sometimes priorities shift and we need to adapt. We saw this with the one-to-one initiative, which at the high school became bring your own device. It's important to note that the Board of Education has a significant role in shaping the district's or the town's financial strategy. While educational priorities are paramount, we must also consider other factors such as long-term sustainability, infrastructure needs, and potential economic challenges. The Board of Education has the authority to make decisions about how funds are allocated, and neither the Board of Finance nor the RTM has line item veto power. This responsibility requires us to be thoughtful, strategic, and financially responsible. We are approximately 2/3 of overall tax spend in this town, and even with that, not all school spend occurs in our budget. The current Board of Selectmen budget carries $6.4 million of debt service. At this time, most of those dollars are debt on the Oxbridge build and a few other capital projects such as the tracks or roofs. The number will continue to climb as we begin to pay more towards the renovations of the HHR schools. Next year's debt service is estimated at $7.44 million. To put that into context, it would add just under another 6 to 7% to our budget. Longer term, we're planning for work on the middle school shortly after HHR is completed. Almost done. Once the Board of Education approves the budget, it will be sent to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance will then be responsible for reconciling its tax strategy with our operational needs. This collaboration is essential to ensure that the district's financial plan is sustainable and meets the needs of our students. The BOF will send its recommended budgets to the RTM for final approval. And as I noted earlier, while the Board of Finance will be reconciling tax strategy with operational needs, that doesn't mean they get to choose where we put the dollars. That is our responsibility. By working in partnership and making informed decisions, we can ensure that our budget reflects the values and priorities of all of our stakeholders in this community. It's important and difficult work, and we thank you all as we undertake this next step. Okay. With that, I'll move to public comment.
Good evening. If anybody in person or online would like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium or use the raised hand icon and wait to be recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and address for the record and note that you will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Please note the time with the chair.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education. My name is Janiris Frias, and my address is 103 Tokenique Road. I'm a senior at Darien High School and the student body president. I'm here to speak on behalf of the students about the importance of later school start times. This issue has been on the minds of many students, especially since neighboring towns have made changes to their start times. I've had countless conversations with my friends and classmates, and the consensus is clear. We're all tired. Personally, with my jam-packed schedule, I'm often not in bed until 11:30 on most nights, only to wake up for a 6:39 bus. These hours fall well short of the 8 hours that sleep experts recommend for high school students. I've had days when I feel like I'm not even retaining the material I'm learning because I'm so tired. And it's not just me. Many students are dealing with the same issue, balancing sports, homework, and jobs, all while struggling to get enough sleep. A later start time would make a huge difference for all of us. I've spoken with students who have said they would be able to focus better in class if they weren't so exhausted. We all try to give our best, but we can't be at our best when we're running on empty. I understand that shifting the start time isn't easy, and there are many logistics to consider, but I truly believe this is an issue worth addressing. It's about more than just starting school later. It's about ensuring that students, your kids, and the future leaders of the world are healthy, happy, and able to succeed in all aspects of their lives. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing what steps can be taken to make this change happen.
Thank you for speaking.
Crystal Hill, CDSP Chair, 300 Brookside Road. Good evening. It appears as if we are approaching the start of another tough budget season. The Board of Finance has already provided guidance that town boards need to approve budgets with increases in a 3 to 4% range, while the superintendent's materials for this evening suggest a realistic budget will reflect an increase of at least 6%. An increase driven largely by contractually mandated salary adjustments and rising healthcare costs. So as we head towards the official budget season, I wanted to share with you what I hear overwhelmingly from parents in this community. The budget needs to meet the needs of our students. These parents are taxpayers too, so they understand the reality of the need to keep mill rates reasonable. They are supportive of cost-saving measures that can deliver both the quantity and quality of programs our schools offer more efficiently. But efficiencies that would cut student programming or reduce the numbers of teachers and staff in our buildings are concerning to most parents. Students are already dealing with the consequences of last year's efficiencies that reduced the number of teachers at MMS and our elementary schools in the current year. You have heard from parents, PTO reps, and teachers themselves expressing how those cuts have negatively impacted our students and our staff. Parents understand that a process that lingers well into the spring is messy, it's complicated, it's not ideal. But they also believe that this board's primary objective must be to pass a budget that serves the children of this community and in an efficient and responsible manner. But its primary objective should never be to hit a predetermined bottom line or percentage increase. So during this year's budget process, please remember that the biggest measure of success with this school district and this school board is ensuring that every decision you make prioritizes the needs of our students. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking.
Good evening. Luz Bueno, 123 Hoyt Street. I'm not going to talk about inflation today. I will in the coming weeks, but not tonight. I'm here tonight to speak about visual arts. We're losing teachers, reducing the budget, and removed its independence, putting it under the music department. Nationwide, when teachers move between schools in their district, they're much more likely to move to a school with a smaller proportion of students living in poverty than the school they left. Not in our case. Teachers are leaving to less affluent places. My oldest daughter is a senior. I pushed her into art very early, and she's a wonderful artist. Until 10th grade, she wanted to be an artist. Then she discovered chemistry and biology, science. Visual arts were essential for her, not just for her education and for her mental health during COVID or when we moved around a couple of times. Visual arts were essential for her to learn to do things, create, imagine what she could do. Leonardo da Vinci was a visual artist, and he mixed most of his paints. He knew a lot about chemistry and pigments. He also knew about human anatomy. He combined all those skills, the art and the science, the thinking and the doing. And that is why he could design what scientists created several centuries later. I urge you to give priority, again, to visual arts program. I mean, there's plenty evidence about the relationship between visual arts and science, and it's really essential. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in person like to participate? All right, Ms. Dunduvan, you have been recognized. Please state your name and address for the record and note you will have up to 3 minutes to speak.
Okay. I'm Julia Dendoven. I live at 123 Hoyt Street. I'm a senior and an AP art student at the high school, and I wanted to talk about how important the art programs at the high school are to me. I started art during my sophomore year, and it quickly became a space where I could truly express myself. Between academically intense classes, art offers something unique, a chance to slow down and reflect in a way no other class can. It's not just a break. It's a resource that helps balance the stress of school while still challenging students to think creatively and to think differently. Art has been the perfect outlet for me and a resource for every single student who has graduated from the high school since it was founded. Because we all take at least one art class, every student walks through the art studio before they walk out of the school at the end of their 4 years. Therefore, it's an experience that leaves an impact on every single student. And I believe that programs that leave an impact on every single student should be protected to the best of the town's ability. Thank you.
Thank you for speaking.
Would anybody else online like to participate? Please use the raised hand icon. We have no more raised hands at this time.
Thank you, Cass. That I'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being present and also for being online. I just want to mention, it's unusual to have these little models in front of us, but I just want to reiterate a wee lesson that I saw last week at the home school and just bring it to life a little bit. And it was around the books that you have in front of you. That was the literacy theme that the third graders read, and they were partnering with their buddies in kindergarten. This activity touched on a lot of STEM concepts at this particular age. It culminated in a Macy's Day sort of parade. It just captured also some of the attributes of the vision of the graduate, from curiosity to empathy, collaboration, and communication. So there's a wee clip here, just 2 seconds long. I just wanted to give the teacher a shout out. It was our librarian, Mrs. Sheridan, at the home school, and the kids were all excited about it. So I just wanted to give it a wee profile and recognize the teacher and the kids.
Yeah, where's your Let's have a round of applause for the parade.
So when the kids watch the Macy's Day Parade, I'm sure they will recall their own Macy's Day experience at the elementary school. So thank you to the teacher and to our staff members and to the kids for participating. Thanks also to members of the PTOs at the high school, middle school, and our generous sponsors that just recently brought Max Stattle to us. And that was for social media. And I'll leave it to the kids this evening maybe to talk about some of their experiences in that capacity. Throughout this past week or two, the schools have been fundraising for community organizations around this time of the year and people in need. They have done everything from fundraisers financially to turkey drives. We also had blankets for preemies. This previous photograph, I think, was from our SSO and Mr. Betts, I think, over at Oxford or at Tokenique. I don't know if you can recognize them in there, but that's who they are. We also had Mr. Malillo. He actually took a few pies to the face for the fun of it. So your administrators and your schools have been participating in fundraising activities and having a wee bit of fun themselves along the way at this time of the year. Quiz Bowl was recognized as a National Middle School Quiz Bowl team last week. So congratulations to their ongoing success. The winter concerts are coming up along the way. They've already sort of started. Don't forget the big holiday concert, which will be fun to see with the video wall too. I can't remember the date of that one, but when you come back, we'll notice it for you. We have Special Education Awareness Day is being celebrated on December 2nd for all students and all faculty. Thank you to members of the PTO who support that particular event. Thanksgiving to our parents. This is the first time that there'll be no school tomorrow. I don't know how you kids feel about that. I know your teachers feel good about it. This is the first time for experiencing that. And from my own perspective, I wish all our families, our staff, and our students a relaxing, rejuvenating time of connectedness to your families. And I will say it's a time of gratitude, and I'm deeply grateful to be part of this organization and public school system with the colleagues that we have and that we work with in our community every day. Thank you. And go Blue Wave, okay, on the turkey bowl. All right, we need a win, okay? I'm just saying, like, we just need a win. Thank you.
Thank you. Student representative reports, Brenna and Ryan.
As Dr. Adley just mentioned, we're coming into our Thanksgiving recess. This will be our first 5-day Thanksgiving recess, to my knowledge, and we're so excited to have this time to rest and rejuvenate as a community. Additionally, we are cheering on our Blue Wave football team on Thursday against our true rivals, but they'll be facing off on the home turf. Hopefully, if weather permits, we'll have our band playing as well, and it'll be so nice to have our community come out and rally together. Our band just had our holiday concert with a feature from the Tudor Singers, as well as we've just officially said goodbye to the Crucible with the final round of auditions for Les Mis taking place today. Keep your eyes peeled.
Yes.
Ticket sales will be up and out before you know it. And we will have our Holiday Spectrum concert, which is across all ensembles on December 18th. So
Thank you.
also keep your eyes peeled for that date as well.
Yeah, along with that, many of our winter sports are up and coming right after this new 5-day break. So looking forward to many great seasons, especially for our boys basketball, hockey, and many of our girls basketball teams as well, as along with many of the other winter sport teams. So looking for a great season from all of them. And as Brandon alluded to, many great artistic performances coming up in the winter as well.
Thank you both. Okay. Approval of the minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the organizational meeting and regular meeting held on November 12th? That's Joanna, seconded by Dennis. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Okay. Board committee reports. I don't think we've had any. No? Okay. I will note, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the meeting, our next meeting is the 10th and the tour of the schools is the 7th. So we'll have a tour of all the schools on the capital plan to start off. And then a tour of the Hanley Homes and Royal schools will be available after that. So hope to see everybody on the 7th. Members of the Board of Finance and RTM are also been invited to that. Okay, presentations, discussion and possible action. Discussion and possible action on revisions to Educator Diversity Plan, March.
So in April, the board approved the submission of the original plan. In October, we received feedback from the state. The feedback wasn't really surprising. Some of it was duly noted and we did make changes. We tried to make things more time bound. We tried to spread out our goals over 3 years, of which is the plan's duration. We did try to be more specific in some areas. What we were not willing to do in all instances is to put numbers to our goals. The similar districts around us are struggling with the same issue of quotas and numbers. We did receive advice from Shipman and Goodwin about the potential illegality of doing that. And I think that with some advice from Dr. Adley, we had a nice finesse that we will make every effort to maintain or increase the diversity. The suggestion that we didn't do a root cause analysis is just wrong. The committee spoke in depth about why our numbers are where they are and how we could make them better. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions for Marge? We do need to vote on this.
Yes, please.
No questions at this time? Yes, Katie.
Thank you. Marge, can you just remind us what the committee makeup is?
So the committee is made up of me, Dr. McCarthy, Kathy Fulton, who's a social studies teacher at the high school, and our 2 teachers in residence, our 2 elementary teachers in residence. The good news is that as people saw the presentation in April, we have more people who'd like to join us. So as soon as we get final approval, and my understanding from people who've had some feedback in the second round is that, you know, whatever we submit is going to be approved. We've already received conditional approval, so we'll broaden the committee at that point.
All right. With that, may I have a motion to approve the revisions to the Educator Diversity Plan? That is Dennis, seconded by Robin. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, Marge. Okay. Update on special education. Shirley, Scott, and Laura.
If I may just have a moment to make sure that Laura Straighton is online. Hi, Laura. And Dr. Scott McCarthy are joining us on Zoom.
He's on.
He's on?
Yes, he's on.
Who's on that side?
He has to turn it. There he goes.
There we go. Hi, Scott. Hi, Laura. Thank you, everyone, and good evening, members of the board, students, colleagues, and to the community. Each year we have the opportunity to present on the Special Education Student Services Program Overview and Initiatives. We have with us this evening Laura Straighton, our ELP Director, as well as Scott McCarthy, our K through 12 Special Education and Student Services Director as well. If I can start with the department structure, on our department structure is our new organization plan. As noted in our presentation, this is the 2024 administrative restructuring. And if you look at the department structure this year, we have Dr. Scott McCarthy is now the K through 12 Director of Special Education Services. And we have Sarah O'Malley, our Program Director for Middlesex Middle School, as well as Janine Newell, our Program Director for High School, in our restructuring this year of our department. In our program overview each year, we have an opportunity just to remind everyone that our program is designed from least restrictive to more supportive and environmental opportunities. Most students who receive just a related service, that's our least restrictive environment, where they're in the general education classroom for the majority of the day, and they may just be pulled for a related service or push-in service. We go on to the next level, which is supplemental services, and we have that in our ELP program, our K through 12 program. Our grade 5 does have early ELA classes for co-taught, and of course, our Middlesex and high school have co-taught classes in both ELA and mathematics. In our supplemental services, we have resource room programs in the elementary school as well in middle school. We call them learning centers in the high school, which are small group and specially designed instruction. And we also have direct reading in grades 6 through 12 in both Middlesex and the high school. Our special programs we have, which really support social emotional learning in grades 6 through 8 is our AIM program, and in 9 through 12 is our CORE program. Modified classes for students who need a high level of specially designed instruction in our Alternative Learning Center, our ALC program in Middlesex. We have that in grades 6 through 8, and our comprehensive classes we have in the high school in grades 9 through 12. And our specialized programs, where we have individualized programs designed to really meet our needs of our learners, may vary from ELP in our readiness program, where those students spend the majority of their day in specially designed instruction as they learn to approximate into the included environment. In our K through 5 developmental learning centers, our DLC programs, students have the opportunity to really work in especially designed instruction as they approximate into the general education classroom. And in our ALC and our Excel programs, both 6 through 8 and 9 through 12, again, opportunities to really work on their goals and objectives in their specialized instructional environments and to move into throughout the inclusive environments throughout the school day. For teaching and learning, we've emphasized, and you can see that, but I'll just focus on some of the areas that we're really emphasizing this year, is really looking at multisensory reading programs such as Orton Gillingham and Wilson Reading, as we look at a self-study for next year to join in the science of reading and the kind of overall methodology and training we need to do for all our teachers. As we look at communication methodology highlights, we're looking at different opportunities for oral motor. We haven't been successful in ensuring a speech pathologist this year, although the board has approved it. Oral motor SLPs are very much involved in private practice, and it's very difficult to get them to come into school districts. But we have been successful in getting our own SLPs to come in doing visualizing and verbalizing, being able to do Michelle Garcia and help support our other SLPs. So we are working toward agency and capacity, both in social stories and social exchange communication, as well as AAC, alternative communication devices. And lastly, in clinical methodology, we've spoken over the years at our DBT programs. Back in 2017-18, we actually contracted for those services with Dr. Dad's agency, CVC. We now have our own supervision, our own training, and Dr. Dad has in an extraordinary way taken on the training of our psychologists, social workers, several of our school counselors, several of our specialized teachers in our core program and AIM program to really support our instruction, as well as our psychologist interns. And professional learning, again, I'll just highlight two of the areas we want to emphasize. One is standard-based goal writing. Beginning in January, actually this year, Connecticut SEDS has now introduced a standard-based goal writing that all our teachers were actually trained on back in November during PD Day that we will be implementing and beginning to work on. Our school psychologist also worked on November on intervention planning and looking at intensive behavioral functional assessments as well as behavior intervention plans. We continue to work on speech and language, on prompt and different oral fluency. And our para-educators have been trained in working on restorative practice, as well as implementing de-escalation and tolerance strategies. Distress tolerance. Workshops continue to be a goal of partnership. Some of the areas are identified there. I think what we're very excited about, there was recently a workshop I think Royal did in terms of how to support your child at home that was very well received. We had great feedback from families. And looking, of course, at our transitional life course planning is what we're working on with our middle and high school as well. Lastly, thank you to community organizations, especially CDSP, Town of Mental Health Task Force, Thriving Youth, and CPAC for working with us, supporting our programs and our students and working together in partnership. I'm going to turn it over to Laura, who will share with you our ELP 5-day program implementation update.
Good evening, everyone. I was delighted to have offered our 5-day inclusion program to all of our students last school year or for this school year. In looking at the trends from last year to this year, I wanted to share that we started with 78 students at the start of the 23-24 school year, and we ended with 108, which means we grew about 30 students over that school year. And we had 25, we were ending at 25 itinerant students. Those are students who just come to ELP for speech and language services a couple times a week. In reviewing our evaluation over last school year, we evaluated 124 students. 37 of those students started through that birth to 3 process. The SRBI is scientifically based research intervention, or now called multi-tiered systems support or support systems. 51 students were through that process. And then we had 36 referrals from the community, which totaled the 124 students. So this school year, we offered the 5-day program and the 4-day program, and we started off with 85 students for the September start. 62 of those students attended the 5-day program, and 23 students attended the 4-day. Currently, as of November 22nd, we have a total of 92 students attending ELP. 65 of them are attending the 5-day program, and 27 of them are attending the 4-day program. And currently, we have 20 students who receive itinerant services. And currently reviewing our evaluations, we have 71 currently ongoing. Not all at once, but right now we have 71. 21 of those are from birth to 3. We are engaged in 26 MTSS process in the communities, working with community preschool schools with students. And then we have 24 current evaluations that we're referring to the PPT process. That makes up 71. So looking forward, we're really excited to continue the 5-day program and looking at the support to continue that 50-50, the 50% typically developing students to students with special needs. It's really important that we continue to have all of that on the 5-day. We are continuing a conversation that we started with administration and staff around moving ELP possibly to the 6-day elementary rotation. This would align us with the current special schedules and other activities that happen at the elementary schools on that 6-day rotation. We are continuing to monitor our needs through the PPT process and bringing in those students through the evaluations. We're continuing to streamline our MTSS process with the community preschools. We're continuing to work around play-based learning and curriculum writing for this school year. So thank you for this opportunity with you all, and I'm turning it over to Dr. Scott McCarthy.
Laura. Good evening, everyone. Next, we'd like to provide you an update on our membership within the Connecticut Psychology Consortium, CPC. So as many of you remember from our presentation last year, CPC is a partnership with 4 Connecticut agencies, of which we are the only Connecticut public school. We became eligible for this partnership through Dr. Dad's licensure status, which allows us to supervise doctoral level eligible school psychologists as interns. The consortium this year applied for provisional membership and was awarded provisional membership in APIC, which is a wonderful thing for a public school district to have. This year, we have 2 school psychology interns, one through CPC, and we are developing and honing their clinical and assessment and evaluation skills while supporting the district's needs in those areas. To date, for our application process going into the 25-26 school year, we have 10 competitive applications, which we are reviewing now and scheduling interviews with CPC and Dr. Dad for January. The next portion of our presentation will review and overview district, local, and state trends in special education that are relevant to our current programming. So the data in this first slide represent a trend in the number of students with IEPs, both in district and out of district in the Darien Public Schools. As you can see, a clear increasing trend is evident across the 5 years. Of note, 173 additional students with IEPs are in the district today than 5 years ago. And there were 2 years, the 2021-2022 and 2023-2024 school year, in which we experienced significant increases in 1 year. These data represent the trend in educational classifications of students with IEPs for the last 3 available years. Educational classifications are typically released by the state by now in the school year. However, the state has not yet released the 23-24 school year data. As you can see, a slight increase is observed in the percentage of qualified students with autism, while a slight decrease is noted in the percentage of students with speech and language impairments. Beyond that, there are not significant changes in educational classifications observed recently. This graph represents the trend of students, trend in the number of students with IEPs by level over the past 4 years. So as you can see, there are a few notable trends. The first is that there's an increase observed in ELP during this school year, which represents both the first school year of the change in the kindergarten start date and the group of students who were primarily born in 2020. Another notable trend is that the number of students with IEPs at the elementary level has increased each year over the 4 years by 80 students, with the smallest increase noted this current school year, which is 7 students. The number of students with IEPs at the middle school and the high school level have remained fairly consistent, with sort of a slight dip in the 22-23 school year at the middle school. This next graph represents the trend in the number of students with IEPs by grade in the 24-25 school year, the current school year. Again, a few trends of note. The large ELP class does require some monitoring as it represents both 3- and 4-year-olds, but as we know, it will increase through the school year as students age into the program. We can also see that a bubble exists in grades 4 through 6, which is the K1-2 class of 2020-21. This will impact the number of students with IEPs at MMS over the next 2 school years. So we're confident that the administrative restructure that occurred and is implemented this school year will help the facilitation of meetings for those students as we move forward and see that sort of large class age into the middle school. In addition, a bubble exists in grades 11 through 12. When we look back to last year, that same bubble existed. And so the DHS administration has begun reviewing these data, which were finalized this October, to understand it better so that we can understand that trend. The data on this graph represent the percentage of students with IEPs in both Darien and the state over the past 3 years. So as you can see from the data, the percentage of students has increased in both the state and in Darien, with Darien increasing slightly more than the state average. At a more local level, the data in this graph, one back. Great, thanks. The data in this graph represents a 5-year trend in classification rates with students with IEPs in our district reference group. As you can see, every district in the DIRG has realized an increase in the percentage of students with IEPs over the past 5 years. While Darien is the highest in the DIRG, it has not increased at the highest or fastest pace, which we can see in the next slide, which represents the rate change in students with IEPs over the past 5 years, with Darien being on the left in the dark blue. Darien's increase over the past 5 years is 3rd in the DIRG after Weston and Richfield. This graph was developed in response to Board of Education questions regarding the reason for Darien having the highest percentage of students with IEPs in the dirt. These data have been presented previously to the board in an annual report in 5-year dirt lookbacks, but do warrant another look back relative to this question. As you can see, Darien, again on the left in the dark blue, has always had, at least since the 2012-2013 school year, the highest percentage of students with IEPs, about 30% higher than Canaan, Ridgefield, and Weston, and higher than the other towns as well. So along with our colleagues in the buildings, the curriculum instruction department, we're really looking forward to a self-study, which I know Shirley is going to talk about later, to evaluate these data more closely. And with that, I will turn it back to Shirley to review our out-of-district trend.
And before I go on to the next slide, if I could just say, this doesn't answer the question why we have the highest rate. We just did a look back, and we had presented actually several years ago where we had this slide as well to show as we go through our self-study of why do we have the highest rate, that one of the things is that it was as far back as 12 years ago, and it has been that trend. So it just informs us the trend is that historic. As to the variables why, we'll speak about that as we go through our self-study of what are some of the contributing variables. For out-of-district trends, and we were mindful both in answering questions to the board and in looking at the memorandum as well of out-of-district trends. And on the continuing services, we've gone over the years. These are state-approved schools. And what we want to make sure that everyone is informed of, these are the schools that most often our students do go to, but they're not limited to. But these are approved schools in the continuum. And if you just look at the fields to understand, because some of it is why our students require out-of-district programs. If you look at the day public and private programs, some of them are specialized transition, which we know and will speak to students who attend those. The therapeutic day programs are therapeutic day programs that public schools can't necessarily address the needs of those students. They're highly specialized for a high level of clinical support. The therapeutic or transition residential programs, when students aren't able to be successful in a day program and really need a 24/7 supervision for safety, for clinical reasons for that, is when we look to state-approved therapeutic residential programs. And the out-of-state therapeutic transition residential program, just to give some understanding, is there are students who aren't accepted to in-state programs because of their particular needs, and we do need to seek out of state. Families want their students as close to home as they can be, but depending on the level of need of those students, very often they may not be accepted to state programs, and we need to seek out of district or out of state. And the last one, of course, are hospital settings, which are usually transitional support for students as they're transitioning into other programs that a PPT may recommend. So for the district trends of IEP placements by level, and we did this last year also, but you can see that there is a trend and it is down. Meant to understand that, that the students in this cohort by grades, by elementary, middle, and high school, the trend has been going down or staying flat in those areas. In the unilateral placement of parents, again, the trend seems to be stable and somewhat lower, higher this year, but lower than other years. And again, if you look at by grade level and by school level, we can see that trend in the 9-12 range. And when you look at those unilateral placements, again, without representing students, but understanding that those programs in unilateral are very often non-state approved programs for students who require either residential or highly therapeutic programs that we're not able to place within our own state approved schools, and parents may have to seek a non-approved out-of-district program for those students with a high level of need. I'll go on back to Scott for transition programming. The one thing I want to ask, because Rich asked that I just share this, just for the board understands, the cohort that you're looking at in students of unilateral placements is not the same from year to year. So if a question that anyone would ask is, why did your number go down, but your costs go up, is because it's not the same cohort of students. There actually are 10 new students in that who were not in there last year. And actually over the course of the last 4 years, there were 26 different students in those cohorts in different programs. So that, if you understand without more, that explains why a cost can go up. If you have 10 new placements, that could be $1 million, as opposed to the idea of having the same cohort. So cohorts change. And to give you an idea of how many students return from district also, I'll share that with you as well. I'm going to turn over to transition to Scott.
Thanks, Shirley. In the next portion of our presentation, we'd like to provide you an update on the work of the Transition Steering Committee and its proposal that was submitted to the superintendent and hopefully soon the board.
Scott, before I go back, let me just do that now so I'm not confusing the board, okay? Because I see a question coming in that, not point. So on the transition, look at the numbers. So 29, there were 21 change of placements between 2020 and 2024. If you look at the cohort of students, there have been 21 changes. There are 4 new placements this year, just to give you an idea of the number of students thus far. Okay, Scott.
Sure. The Transition Steering Committee presented to the board in March of 2024, and I'd encourage any members to review that presentation, which had detailed context of the work. But as a quick and brief refresher, the committee began its work as part of recent changes to legislation, which required districts to begin transition planning at age 14 for students, and also to provide comprehensive transition programming to students with comprehensive profiles until the end of the school year in which the student turns 22, which was a change from previous statute where we were required to do the same for students to the end of the school year in which the student turned 21. The Transition Steering Committee began its work at the beginning of the 2023-2024 school year, where a representative group of special educators, related service providers, and administrators across the middle school and high school and central services worked closely to evaluate district needs, conduct research on best practices in transition programming that exist locally, visit transition programs that do exist locally, review transition programs that exist across the state and nationally, and propose action steps to the board, which happened in the March 2024 meeting. The work of the committee during the 24-25 school year has focused so far on finalizing the proposal for a comprehensive transition program through meeting with families individually, continuing to solidify our community partnerships, and engaging in professional learning on best practices in transition assessment. Of note, the transition programming cohort projection graph on this slide was reviewed in the March presentation, but is worth reviewing and noting again that we see that a significant increase in the number of students who we currently project are eligible for transition programming from 18 to 22 is beginning in the 25-26 school year. And as you know, many of these students and their families, just like all students and families, can begin their process of thinking about what their students will do after their high school, either graduation ceremony or participating in a ceremony, walking for a certificate of completion. And so we know that those students and their families are beginning to engage in a review process for themselves, along with their PPTs, and we'd like to get ahead of that by thinking about developing, or not by thinking about, by actually developing and implementing a program which these families can review and use as part of their planning processes. A fiscal year 26 proposal has been submitted to the superintendent for consideration for submission to the board this January. We were asked to provide some information and context and detail about that budget submission and proposal. The comprehensive program proposal includes a facility which would require adaptive classroom space, an adaptive kitchen, instructional spaces for activities of daily living, an accessible bathroom, kitchen appliances, other appliances needed for activities of daily living, like a washer and dryer, furniture, dedicated staffing, which would include a 1.0 FTE special education teacher, and at this time, 3.0 FTE paraeducators. And at this time, we're proposing utilizing an itinerant related service model. As we continue to review our community partnerships with the Darien Chamber of Commerce to help establish internships and job sites along with UConn Stanford for meaningful and authentic inclusion experiences, we will also be reviewing our transportation needs. But at this time, we do predict in our proposal that we will need some driver allocation as well. So the proposal includes an approximate $500,000 request in the fiscal year 26 budget for a lease, which will be about 150,000, equipment for the space, about 5,000, staffing, and what we are currently predicting for fiscal year 26 of an out-of-district tuition offset of about $250,000, which would increase each year as you see that cohort will continue to get larger. And I will turn it back to Shirley to review our future goals and outcomes.
And for looking forward goals and outcomes, again, we'll highlight some of the goals that we're really going to move forward. Restorative practice, we've already begun training our paraeducators and most of our staff members. UDL, Amy has spoken to and I've spoken to, and that is one of our initiatives for this year. We've done some training over the summer, but we're just beginning that process. For intensive behavior support programming, once again, we're looking to bring that in-house with our own school psychologists and BCBAs, not to have to rely on outside resources and agencies. And most excitingly, as I mentioned earlier, the standard aligned goal development with Connecticut SEDS in aligning our goals and objectives in our IEPs to the Connecticut state standards. In our self-studies that we mentioned earlier, the three that we're focusing on are multisensory instruction models such as OG and Wilson, working in concert with Amy and all of our staff. You'll hear more about that during the budget cycle. For continued MTSS development and collaboration with all of our teachers, and as well as elementary identification trends and MTSS relationship. To go back to the question of why are our classification rates so high, that's where we have to begin looking. And as Dr. Adley said earlier, December 2nd begins the week. Different schools are celebrating it on different days. On a personal note, I began teaching in that year of 1975 when there was a committee on handicap, actually it was called that. Special education was a place that children went to, not a service that they received. And in 50 years, we certainly have changed it being a place where you go to a service and a program where all children are general education children who are receiving supplemental and specialized support in their community schools. We celebrate December 2nd, and next year will be 50 years. And thank you to the PTOs for all these upcoming treats and specialties, and also the books that CDSP has bought for the elementary schools called Inclusion that every teacher is getting a copy of next week, I believe. And lastly, we have questions, but before, just the notation that we have appendices that we added UDL to our glossary and of acronyms for this year. That we also wanted to show that UDL is not just something we're talking about, but how we're aligning that to our strategic plan actions in both 1B and 2B. And also, we were asked about SBACs and looking at some of them, and we wanted to share this slide with you. Again, we noted that the SA2 school days we don't have here, but the link to the questions on SBACs for students is contained in the appendix. And we'll take questions, and thanks for your time.
Okay, thank you very much to the team, all of you. There's a lot in this presentation. So two things. Number one, I think we'll go through this section by section and take questions per section. Number two, if we get into an area where we feel like there are just so many questions that we want to either have a memorandum or follow up at a subsequent meeting, we have a lot to do tonight. So if it becomes clear that we need to move on, we'll just collect the questions and come back to them.
And Jill, may I just add, in the memorandum that Dr. Adley did send, we tried to answer most of the questions, and in some of them, we did say that we're in the process of gathering that data.
Yes.
And cut some of the items.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I'll start with the introduction. Are there any questions about the preliminary department structure or the continuum of services? Oh, okay. Are there questions about EOP, the 5-day program and or the 5-day implementation? Katie?
Hi, Shirley. Thank you for this. Regarding this switch from 4-day to 5-day, and recognizing that some students are choosing to come for 4 days, can you give us a little additional color on how the evaluations are being conducted? Laura had a couple of slides in there that had some charts with some numbers, and they're significant. How does that work since there's no longer kind of that working day on Friday?
I'll begin to answer and then I'll turn it over to Laura because she may have more specific details. I think what we've done also is we've tried to use opportunities where she'll give you a number of evals that are currently in process. But one, using that afternoon dismissal happens at 1:30 on Mondays through Thursdays and at 12:30 on Friday. So using some of that PM for it. That doesn't help with visits. So Laura will speak more to visits and community visits. Having teachers, if they are going out, and Laura can speak to it, to do a site visit, scheduling either SLPs or OTs or PTs or different service providers to come in at that time, or our school psychologist who does group lessons, looking at other related service providers to cover that. Laura has more detail than I do, but that's just some of the opportunities. Laura, did you want to add to that, how you're managing that? And you're on screen, Laura. Might be muted. I don't.
Okay, I had to hit 2 buttons to unmute.
Okay.
So Shirley did a good job explaining in general how we are doing it. We do utilize time at the end of the day. We also have the morning and Fridays. Some of the classrooms have fewer students. They're mostly in the BB3 classrooms. So perhaps we have special activities going on for those classrooms, and then that frees up a teacher to conduct some evaluations in a classroom. We have a building sub, however, that person has received a job someplace else. So we are looking for a building sub, but that person also was utilized to cover a classroom so that they would release teachers so that they can complete evaluations throughout the time. So, it's just carefully planning who's out of the building when and making sure that we can cover that. And we have a rotation of evaluations of who is next on the evaluation. So it's not hitting one teacher all of the time. Does that help?
Laura, with the new change in the kindergarten legislation, has that impacted your population at all?
So this school year, we did have a 5-year-old class or a classroom that is just dedicated, 2 classrooms that are just dedicated for children that are going up forward. I think we had 4 students in that September to December birthday that were identified. So we really worked to schedule classes around that. So we have seen an increase, and as we move forward in the school year, evaluations and referrals come throughout the school year. So, that is a population that we are targeting moving forward.
Okay, so it looks like that just about explains the difference in your enrollment. Not quite, but just about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Are we expecting, based on what we're modeling and what we know is the young children coming out of birth to 3, are we expecting that to be a relatively constant number, or is it variable?
I think it's either staying or growing. I feel like, the numbers are showing us that many of our students we're trending on the higher end than the lower end right now. And perhaps the needs are changing in the populations.
Yes.
If I can just add to that, Joe, we have the highest enrollment we've had in the last 10 years, to Laura's point. We have several more comprehensive learners as well in the LP program. So I just want to add that we are expecting to see this trend continue. I would like to add one more piece to Laura's program. Having the ELP program in Oxbridge and having it to have the articulation from our comprehensive learners to the DLC program has been an incredible opportunity. For our kids transition into DLC, some of the students were able to actually move service providers to help them transition over the course of the first week or 2 weeks, to have them work with the other team that's receiving them. So I just want to mention that one of the silver linings of having all the programs together has really been to be able to articulate kids into the K through 5 program for those students who are attending the program.
Great, thank you. Anything else on ELP? Okay. Anything on the psychologists? Joanna?
Hi. Can you just explain again, how this internship works? Are these interns fulfilling one of the two, school psychologist positions in elementary schools? What training have they had up to this point, et cetera?
I'll have to give that to Scott. Scott and Dr. Dad have been working, as Scott had said earlier, it's quite an opportunity for a public school to have this opportunity. So I'll turn it over and he can speak more of the psychologists we have and the interns and where they are.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to. So students in graduate schools of school psychology have a number of different opportunities through which they can complete their internship processes. Doctoral students through APA approved programs can apply for matching internships through APIC, which are the most competitive internships in school psychology. So in Connecticut, schools like the Yale Child Study Center have APIC approved sites. There is not a Connecticut public school that has an APIC approved site. And given the shortage of school psychologists that exists in the country, this was a great opportunity for us to partner with these agencies, given Dr. Dad's ability to supervise interns. And through that partnership, we hope to have 2 interns per year that come from that program. They have received graduate training and completed all of their coursework, and they are required to complete a full year internship in school psychology while supervised through by a licensed psychologist. They complete both group supervision across the 4 sites and group professional learning and individual supervision. And the interns are also completing their dissertation work. So they're also writing their dissertation. So they're sort of kind of completing 2 roles. And while the primary focus of an internship is, of course, to train and educate and prepare an intern, they also benefit us greatly as they bring to us current practices through their research and help us with our evaluations processes as they're learning to complete those evaluation processes, help us in intensive behavior management, et cetera. So it's really kind of a win-win for everyone. And it's also hopefully going to be a future lever for recruitment.
Go ahead. So I'm sorry.
So I think, Joanne, your question is, are they one of the lines of a school psychologist?
Yes.
They're interning with a school psychologist.
Okay, thank you.
Right. And I believe one is a doctoral candidate. I believe one in the other building is not a doctoral candidate. Scott, do I have that right?
That's correct. Yes. So the current CPC intern is the doctoral candidate. So we received, we were only able to get 1 this year. We're hoping that now that we have APIC provisional membership status, that will increase our ability to get 2 interns for next year.
And Dr. Dad and Dr. McCarthy have shared earlier in the slide that we have 10 candidates. That's an extraordinary, outstanding candidates for the internship next year.
10 applicants or 10 folks who will be interning?
Applicants.
Thank you too. Okay. Okay, questions about district trends? Katie?
I wanted to ask about the staffing increases. And I know that this was in the memo. There was a question about that. But at least in my memo, it looked like maybe there was supposed to be a hyperlink that wasn't active for me. I'm referring to page, sorry, 1, 2, 4 of the memo, and it's the third bolded question that says, could we see staffing trends, particularly the year-over-year numbers for paraprofessionals? So, and you had commented that the budget was linked there on the website to outline the approved FTEs.
It wasn't linked, sorry.
It wasn't in mine, which is
Okay.
fine. But could you just talk generally speaking in terms of the percentage increases that we've been seeing, right? That we've been talking for a while about rising identification rates. We've seen in the charts here that things have been going up. Can you just give us a general ballpark into how that's kind of corresponded to SETs and then, maybe even to impact on paraprofessionals as well?
I'd have to go back to the link to compare year over year. I can say that this year, the biggest change in our paraeducators was really that we have 13 of our own, as opposed to using contracted service. That was the real emphasis of switching from contract to that. Of those, we now have 10, we have 10 RBTs of our own that have gone through the training. Some have sat for the exam, some still have to sit for it. So that was really the shift. The number was, because I checked with Rich earlier today. Rich, the number which you gave me.
So there's 112 paras K-12.
Right, and I think I have to go back and look at the number before. I'm sorry, it was in the link. I'm gonna look at that, but it wasn't. I don't think the number was that different the year before. The biggest difference was we were looking to have our own paraeducators, not contracted. That said, we still have some contracted paras, but I can certainly in the memo to Alan show the difference over the last few years of the number of paraeducators.
It would be great to, the paraprofessionals is interesting, but also just the corresponding number of SETs that we have to number of IEPs. And then from there as well, I can't remember if this was in a past presentation, but I know we've discussed before caseloads as well, right? And just, I think that's a good data point for us in terms of, I think that we have some information here on what our student profiles look like, but I'm interested in what our staffing profiles look like too, just especially as we're thinking about the caseloads, the PPT amounts, how that ties into professional development, covering for all of those things in the way that it's interwoven would just be really helpful to understand.
We could do that for the SAT as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Would be helpful to understand as part of that, how staffing shortages in this area impact our work.
And I would like to add one thing to that. There was a summit recently with the Connecticut State Department of Education. I don't know if you had a chance to see that. We can also share that link. And amazing, when you look at it, the first page on that was the shortage of psychologists, shortage of special education teachers. Actually, they gave color to some of the reasons why they think that exists. And I certainly can share that link. It was a few weeks ago. Interestingly enough, when we were discussing it with our team, it was how appreciative we are of our staff and our related service providers and our paraeducators, because we're not experiencing that this year, and we are one of the fortunate ones. We are fully staffed with the exception of one teacher who's out on leave and a speech and language therapist that we couldn't in terms of having someone who is oral motor trained. So we are very appreciative of the incredible commitment our colleagues have in special education teachers, our related service providers, our paraeducators, because we are fully staffed with that exception, right, Mark? Okay, so I just want to acknowledge them. We're the outliers nationwide. So thank you to all our colleagues.
Marge, did you want to add?
Maybe truly just one piece of additional context to that. As well, we are fortunate and feel lucky to be fully staffed this year. The hiring process does feel different. We are not receiving as many applicants for positions. We are having to get more creative with filling leave replacements and things like that, looking at contracted services for some of those leave replacements when we can't find actual certified staff to do that. So it isn't that it's been easy. The number of, like I said, the number of applicants has changed over time. So we are seeing the impact of the shortage, but maybe in a different way right now. We feel fortunate to be fully staffed.
It would be helpful to, even though that's good news on the whole, it would be helpful to understand that quantitatively. Thank you. Any other questions on the, Katie?
Shirley, on page 2 of the memo, the bottom question is talking about categories. And specifically under the learning disability, you note that the state breaks out specific learning disability and then specific learning disability dyslexia. So, but that they aggregate it together. So thank you for this explanation.
I am looking further though, just so you know. So they
Okay.
do aggregate it. It's a category. They have categories. We did have someone in our office reach out to see if there's like, there's an 8A, to see if there's a way that we can even though the state doesn't, they put it in one aggregate. If there's a way without asking people to go count every single IEP of
Yeah.
our case managers, which they could do.
Right.
But I think we've asked the state if there's any other way to do that.
Got it. So this was really interesting to me because, after having combed through your presentations very carefully for several years, I did not realize that this was coming from the state. So I just wanted to ask, in terms of the data that we have and the records that we have, CT SEDS, that's not a functionality where we can run classifications by SLD dyslexia
You can run
ourselves?
it by SLD, but they didn't disaggregate dyslexia.
So,
from
so
it.
you're saying like it's built into CT SEDS
Correct,
then, and
yes.
that's how it comes from. Okay, got it.
But we haven't given up because someone in our office actually has recently today said there's a way to find a way with Connecticut. So
Okay.
Connecticut says if you reach out to them several times and give them, sometimes we're still working on that
Okay, great.
as
Well,
opposed to counting.
thank you for following up on that. I think that information could be really interesting to us as a district, but also it's very timely considering as we're looking at our early literacy program as well. So thanks for your tenacity.
Okay.
Related to
Add
that question.
too.
Oh, go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, just related to that too, and it's a good question, Katie. It's a question that I think we share and a frustration around. The way it works is through CT SEDS, you identify a specific disability, one of the 13 categories, and then the team completes a worksheet separately that identifies the spaces, and the worksheet does not have mining abilities. The disability category does. And so CT SEDS doesn't allow us to manipulate the worksheet that comes with the qualification at the time, just the disability categories. And so that's what creates the complication.
So I have a higher
But we're
level.
still tenacious and we're still working on it.
Yes, yes.
So I have a question related to that, just about our analytical capabilities. So in terms of what's in CT SEDS, does it let us really aggregate and analyze data? We have this and this is good, but anything in the aggregate, is it truly a database or that we can run pretty good analyses on at a lower level than this, or?
Scott probably can speak better than I can, but you can aggregate reports. I can run a list of how many students meet this category. I could run how many students we're trying to run, referrals was asked, we're working on that. How many students are parent referrals? You can't do that in Connecticut SEDS. We do that by hand. How many were district referrals? So we're looking at ways. That said, Connecticut's building Connecticut SEDS.
Right.
So as you ask them questions, this is year 3, I believe, of where we are. As you ask them questions, they do improve on what we're looking at. But IEP Direct actually was easier to write reports. I could have asked it a question and gotten an answer.
Okay.
But Scott knows more. He could speak more to what reports you can ask. Scott, did you want to add anything to that, or does that pretty much cover it?
Yeah, I think it's correct. I think one of the challenges that exists is that CT SEDS operates live, and live data and information are not always cleaned. So the October 1 run is always accurate, which is why we provide that information in this annual report. But if you were to say, I want to run every student who's eligible for ESY this year, it's providing you information for every PPT meeting that has happened in the district, but those might not always be students sitting in seats. And so cleaning the data can become cumbersome to make sure that it's actually accurate. And so they continue to refine and improve that. And I think we are on first name bases with many of the people in their department as we have many of the questions that we're trying to understand better so that we can collect that information for ourselves.
Okay, so really what I want to know, thank you, in addition to that, is we have different kinds of data that we look at for many populations, but we're talking about this one right now. So this is sort of students and their classifications. We would also look at performance data. We'd look at how we work, how we administer the program, and we look at financial data. Which of those are in CT SEDS?
Performance is not other than your IEP progress reports.
Okay.
You can see individual students, of course. You've got your IEP progress reports that you get quarterly.
Okay.
You could see that. As far as your third one after performance was,
Sort of work and administration. So it'd be things like caseloads.
well, we actually can run that we can run that. We run caseloads actually from Aspen. So we can run
From
our
Aspen.
secondary from Aspen. We can do that. Caseloads for elementary, we do by hand.
Okay.
Last year when we asked to Katie's point, I actually put out an email and say, would you please give me a list of all your students and what your groups are in size? So we still do that by hand.
Mhm. Okay.
Now, I don't know the answer to that, but I can ask of Scott, I don't know that, but Heather, I don't know if you can run caseloads in Connecticut SEDS.
You can, because we assign caseloads to staff members to allow them access to see students. But it again requires some cleaning because a district staff member, for example, may be evaluating a student who's out of district. And so we add them to their caseload in CT SED so they can see all of their past information. And then that information would show up in that caseload run. And so it just requires that kind of second level of going through. And so sometimes actually going to the individuals through Aspen is easier because we know the question I think you're asking is what are the in-district caseloads of students? And so that answer is better obtained through Aspen.
And then that other piece of the kind of caseload data is the filling of services, and that we're also doing somewhat manually, correct? Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. And financially is combination of Munis and Excel, Rich?
Everything's in Munis and
Everything's
then
in
we can
Munis.
extract it into Excel.
Thank you.
And we do all our record keeping in Munis.
Thank you. Robin?
I have just a couple of questions. Thank you for the data. Just one question just on educational classifications. So last year at this time, they did have the data from 22, 23. Do we have any sense of why they still have not released the 23, 24 data?
I don't have a sense of why they haven't. We just checked as recently. Usually we receive it somewhere. Our CDEC goes in October 1, and usually sometime in November we do receive it. I don't know why they haven't yet.
When it does become available, would it be possible to update this
Absolutely.
chart and share it? Okay, and then another question I had is with the out of district placements, do we have any comparison data versus our DIRG of out of district placements?
No, other districts don't share that, and nor do they report out on it. We're the only ones who do.
Okay, but the educational classification data does
Come from the
include
state.
out of district as well, correct? Or is it just in district IEPs? The educational classification graph.
The graph,
Yes, you can get that education.
that's from the state, so that would, yeah, that would include all students.
In district IEPs
Yes.
as well as outside. Okay, thank you.
Joanna?
Just building on out of district placements. So you're saying that we couldn't find out, for instance, what our unilateral placement rate is compared to other targeted schools or percentage of money that we spend compared to other targeted schools?
I suppose you can look at their published, you could look at their published budget books, but they don't share out to their board or to other districts what their out of district placements are or their IP placements.
And then you did touch on this a bit in your presentation, but I missed it because you're going so
Fast.
yes. Why, again, are the placements for unilateral and IEP levels at the high school, they do seem high. At elementary level seems underreported, not because of the district not doing what they're doing, because parents don't necessarily tell the district why they're doing it. But so what are your suspicions for why the DHS rates are so high for it?
And again, I think it's, we've seen a high incidence of clinical placements in both residential and therapeutic day programs with our older learners over the past several years. You typically don't get academic placements when you're looking at the high school cohort. And that's, listen, that's many things have happened over the last several years. We've discussed just in terms of clinical disorders, anxiety and depression is up 40% across the entire nation. We've seen an increase in need for 24/7 supervision for some students who require that level of care. So I think there's been an increase in the cohort of students who require that.
Thank you. And then what do you think the district could do differently overall to curb these outplacements? Because this is one of our highest costs. Is there different, starting with?
So there's different cohorts. If you look at, typically you see elementary cohorts as academic. You see more academic, although there's a great deal of anxiety in different areas that happen there, but very often it's academic. Your secondary learners, your middle school and your high school very often may have a higher level of clinical need. School avoidance, social emotional, anxiety disorders, physical disorders, eating and other order disorders. So you might see that more in your secondary cohort. And if you ask the question, what can I do? If you're looking at academic needs, you could do what we're doing. Look at a self-study and look at your academic programs. Are you addressing that? Are you looking at multisensory reading programs? Are you designing a curriculum within general and special education to really support all learners? If you're looking at clinical and more therapeutic programs, it's hard to replicate those, because the reason they're specialized settings is because of the cohort of students and the kind of day treatment they have that can go on for an hour or 2 hours a day is something that's usually in a specialized environment. That said, just to give you an idea, we've brought back, just so I give you the right number, 26 students to district. Between 2020 and 2024, we brought back 26 students, which is why I was explaining there are new students going into that cohort. You have students coming back and students returning. But I think you're able to really focus more on the academic needs. That said, we do build programs. We have a program like Fitch. We have a program like Fitch is a specialized program that really does meet students where they are in terms of looking at it. We've looked at ideas before also for a middle school program that would do that also. So we continue to look at it. At the same time, you need to have a cohort of students that could work together. And very often why you seek out state-approved day therapeutic programs or residential is they have the staffing, they have the cohort, and they have the programs to support students. And you may have one student that meets that need or two. And lastly,
If I could,
we are building capacity as having a director of mental health, having all of our staff trained in DBT that work with our students clinically, having all of our teachers being trained in distress tolerance and looking at ways to do that. I think our commitment to social emotional learning is supporting the kind of intervention to really build capacity. And just to keep in mind, not only our teachers, our administrators are trained also. And restorative practice. All of that is about really mental health.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else on out of district trends? Dennis?
First, Charlie, I thank you for the appendix with all the acronyms, much appreciated. You just mentioned that 26 students have come back. Do we see that on this chart, and how do we, and why have they come back? And what changed? Like, and I don't want to specify each student, but was it that the programs didn't offer what they needed, or did we change something internally that brought them back?
So it's over the course of 4 years. So they're for many different reasons. And many times students come back to high school after they've been in specialized instructional environments. They return. Many times they return in middle school also. They may come back in 7th grade after being away from elementary school and coming in to re-enter middle school. So some of those students over the course of 4 years may be returning to district. Some students are out for 1 year. Some students go to a therapeutic residential program and they return the next year. Some students may go to a program like Links and they're doing a lot of credit recovery and they return in 6 months. So there's not a common reason why students return. I just wanted to share with the board, we wanted to share that those students do return over the course of those 4 years, which is why they're not the same cohort that you're seeing when you look at your numbers in 2024-25. And those are, some students are gone for 2 years in return, depending on what their needs are.
Questions on transition programming?
Sorry, Jill, could I just ask, go back to one district trend question?
Absolutely. I just want to, note the time. So yes, but we still have the strat plan to go through and our guidance discussion. So let's keep the questions coming, but think about whether they're for tonight or for future.
Okay, I think it's for tonight. Okay, great. I just wanted to chat quickly about missed services. This was a big thing that we had discussed at the board table last year, and you had kind of developed and implemented a new plan and brought that back to us. And it does appear in the memo as well, but it has been, since the very beginning of the year that we discussed it. And I just wanted to ask you to just speak quickly on kind of how that's going and what the, how maybe it's changed as well.
And we did mention in the memo also, I think we've developed a system that's working. It's systematic and it's explicit, and we did walk-arounds last year to make sure everyone was very clear and asked the questions. Aspen's able to track it because kids have schedules in middle school and high school, which make it much easier. And we're doing it by hand in elementary school. And we were asking parents if there's any question of what happened, and actually parents have pointed out they don't want to ask, they want to be told. They don't want to have to go look and say, were there missed sessions and how can we do that? So the building administrators are following up when there's missed sessions, that they're informed and informed when they're being made up. And they're doing that by building, by provider. And
Thank
there
you.
are- Sorry. And depending on PPTs, very often a family will develop how they want to have that reported. Some do an electronic log in a Google Doc. Some do a hard piece of paper, actually, and it goes home on Fridays. So they have different systems of how they're recording it.
Okay, great. So two things that you said that make me happy to hear. One is that there is administration oversight and involvement in that, and that two, the communication with the parent and sort of that planning purpose. I did want to ask just one other thing though about how it kind of works. Really, I guess from like a contractual standpoint in terms of missed services, like taking a general education classroom teacher who misses a day of school, the district gets a sub for them and they have lessons plans, and not that it doesn't create a backlog of work, but they're not there for that day, right? They don't make up that day in another way. So how does it work for a special education teacher who is either out for whatever reason, sick or has, some other reason? How do they make up that time and contractually?
I can't answer the contractual time, but that's how we do it, okay? So there's two ways. One, if they're planning PPTs, if you remember, the board was very gracious and appointed Deb Riley. We have Deb Riley, who is a .4, and she actually comes in. If they know they have 5 PPTs, they'll ask her to come in and she'll cover classes, and so they're not missing sessions. As far as absent, if a teacher is absent, who's a special education teacher, and we can't get a sub, that there is a missed session. Typically, they do not make up their absentees. They don't make up their absentees. They make up sessions when they miss when they are present.
Okay, thank you.
Joanna?
Oh, it's a tough. Just.
Okay, great. Fire away.
Sure. So you keep saying transition program and referring to this program you're trying to build for 12 plus, grades 12 plus. But what about the kids that are like 14 to 18 years old? Is there a self-determination curriculum that you use? Or, it's my understanding that starting at age 14, if you have an IEP, you're supposed to be able to plan these kinds of things. If they're getting trained, how are they getting trained in a systemic coaching model?
So transition goals begin at 14, and those are transition goals that are generated in the IEP. And we did answer in the memo, I think somewhat, if you look in the memorandum about what we're looking for alternative.
I mean,
school
yes, they were
counselors.
they were very generalized. I was wondering if you could just give more color and context to what exactly that looks like.
I think we're looking at different transition assessments, which would be inventories. And that's part of our self-study. If you look at one of our 3 self-study areas to see which there are different kind of assessments you can use. Inventories, we use inventories, but some of them are better than others. So we're studying which inventories they are. We're looking at transition goals and how we're writing our goals and how they align with our students' needs. And I think at the same time, which we need to do better at this, is really looking at how early do we start and when do we start looking at different activities. So in our specialized programs, we do start with different activities. We have mock activities, we have pre-book activities, we have different opportunities. But I think looking at transition goals, when we ask our learners who are in transition goals, are we really writing effective goals and what should those look like? So that's one of our self-studies we're working on this year. But in the meantime, we're looking at assessments, we're looking at goal writing and what should those transition goals like, not just explore a career, but what it would look like with more depth and breadth.
I saw the Marist College presentation as part of the, college application night. And she said a lot of really interesting things, but she did say students have to be able to advocate for themselves. They have to know how to go where the offices are to make sure that they get the correct services. So I was, going forward, if we could just learn about how those things are being implemented, from day one, that'd be great.
And we could, and I think our transition goals, because they're college generated when we get to high school are far more specific. I think our focus has to also be on looking at Middlesex as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
And just to add to that too, I know a focus of our presentation tonight was on the comprehensive transition programming because that's part of the FY 26 proposal initiative. That same transition steering committee has focused their work on aspects related to students who receive supplemental services as well. So a huge focus of our professional learning and the PLC at the high school this year include conducting transition assessments. There are a number of transition assessments provided in the best practice guide from the State Department of Education. We have been culling through it, looking through those transition assessments and thinking about where they become appropriate in various portions of students' academic careers. We have done a professional learning session on drafting the post-school outcomes graduation statements, PSOGs, to help to kind of generate that work for students. And we really kind of are trying to do it from a thoughtful framework. So thinking about how do we make sure that our transition assessment practices align with best practices to give us the correct information, that then we can align the goal statements to those assessments, and then we can work with students and provide specialized instruction in those needs that are identified for those students. So we've really been taking kind of a comprehensive approach to it. And I know we didn't talk a lot about that tonight because the priority was thinking about the comprehensive program, but that is work that is ongoing and happening through PLCs and professional learning.
Specific to this section of the presentation, I appreciated the model showing the potential cohort. Can you run us a financial model that compares against the cohort so we can see? I understand, Rich, that these are mostly operational costs, but I assume there's some scalability with the number of staff. So it'd just be helpful to understand if, you know, you're going to have potentially some tuition offsets. Like, what does this look like for a longer? Pardon?
In subsequent years?
Yes.
Go ahead, Robin. Can I ask, there's a similar question, and in the, and I think in the budget initiatives document, it says that there are 3 eligible students. Is that for the 25-26 year? Because you're showing 11 on this graph.
There are 3 new students. The other ones are currently in programs.
Okay, so for the transition in-house program, we would be just talking about new students, not existing that are already outplaced. Is that?
2 of the students are already in program. Sorry, 2 of the students are already attending programs. 1 would be new to the program.
Okay.
In
so
those
but-
3, in the 3.
So this relates to the 11 student number, correct? In the 25-26 graph. I'm just looking at the projections of the eligible number of students that would participate and trying to understand if you're saying that there are 3 eligible, that means another 8 would continue to be outplaced. Is that right?
Yes.
And then the 3 that are eligible, do they have a choice not to do our in-house program if we build it? Do they need to use it?
Yes, no, I think what we had said, Robin, was we've met with families to possibly consider this program. Every family works with us to select the program that would best meet their children's needs. We have an interest of 3 families that would be interested in it.
Okay, I'm just
Yeah.
asking because if we're going to lease a facility
Understood.
for the future and incur staffing and hire people and kind of build it out.
Right.
You're saying that it's possible that there might be 3 people, but they might not use it. And then we would have that cost, but not potentially use it. And I'm just trying to understand
The feedback we got
Right.
from the 3 families is they would be interested in it.
okay.
So-
And in the future, you're seeing potential growth because of the numbers.
And we know when we projected out in Scott's, in the presentation of where we are in 2006, 7, and 8.
Right.
And we would have a larger number, and we have potential students that we believe would definitely be in that program.
So can you clarify the model, all of it, please?
We could
The
do it by
out-of-district
students and
placement, the, all of that would be helpful to understand better, please.
And just one more thing, just
Yeah.
in terms of if we do the in-house, we have this as the budget, the cost. But if they continue to be outplaced.
The offset is it, the offset's actually in that document already, the one we have. which is the offset.
Right, but I guess when we see the projected amount, I'm just, that's.
I think you need to
250.
model the whole cohort, right? So all 11, X number are going to be outplaced. What does that look like? 3 are going to be in place. What would be the potential tuition offset? What does that look like over time?
Or if we did not,
Yeah.
if we didn't do it, the cost, I'm assuming it would be higher. And that's the reason why we would do this. Is that right? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe to provide some just additional clarity on sort of how the cohort analysis subcommittee did their work. So if you see on slide 24 of the presentation, the out-of-district trends IEP placements by level. So 24 and 25 both have a category in the 24-25 school year of students who are in transition programs that are already out of district. And so the cohort model that was projected on slide 29 is current in-district students who would be eligible. And so it's sort of operating from the assumption that some of those students who are already out in their programs may be unlikely to return. And so what we did as a team was met with the families individually. And we have 3 families who we believe if a program were to be developed and implemented next year, we have a high level of confidence that we have those 3 students. There is a potential, we have some families, even out of district families who we talked to through the PPT process, who have expressed interest and would like to understand better what it will look like. Will it be approved? So 3 is kind of our baseline where we believe we have confidence that students will attend for next year. And that cohort analysis from the following year is again those in-district students who are currently here who are projecting would attend the program, and if they were unable to attend the program, would move into that out-of-district cohort profile.
Joanna?
So what I'm hearing from you guys is my general question. What are the efficiencies here? When we moved the OT and the SLPs in-house, it was for multiple reasons, but we got a lot of efficiency out of it. So projecting year after year after year, how are we saving money as well? I understand the component, and we should be bringing students back to our community and with their families, but this is not technically an unmet need right now. So I'd like to see any efficiencies.
So we'll take the cohort of
Maybe if I
students.
could add to Joanna, I think it's a good question related to the financials of the programming. I think from a best practices perspective, I think it's really important to think about the fact that the Darien Public Schools does not have a transition program for kids who are 18 to 22 within its town. And that's the least restrictive environment. And so our job as educators and through the PPT process is to think about providing students an appropriate program within their least restrictive environment, helping them understand their community, work and live in their community, develop social relationships within their community. And a huge part of having a transition program like this is having the community also learn how to work with our students as they participate with our students in the community. And so there's both that piece, and then there's the understanding of the financial implications as well. And so we see that both things are better by having a program. That by having a program in our district where we have many new businesses opening, we have a relationship with the Chamber of Commerce who is excited to work with us and help establish these internships and sites for our students to work and live in their own community. We really believe that that's best practice, and that families will be excited about that opportunity. And we've already seen that when we've met with them. So I think we would be happy to provide sort of the future 5-year projection of the offsets to out of district placements to understand that financial piece, but I also want to just kind of anchor that back to why are we doing this and why is this a best practice for kids?
I just want to add to that also, Joanne, what Scott's saying also, we built FIT starting with 3 students. You know, because we know sometimes in terms of efficacies and efficiencies, it's not always cost effective when you start the program. But what we can do is we'll run what Robin's asking. We can run 4 years because we know our graduation rate, we know our students, we know several of our students who are currently in transition programs who are remaining in those programs because we didn't have a program. And some of them are very different programs. They're not programs that we'll be offering. And then we'll show you that look forward of the next 4 years, and that might answer both the efficiencies of it as well as what the student needs are.
John?
Is there a happy medium along these lines where we can pool resources with surrounding districts? I mean, I have some experience with the Clemson Life program, which recently gotten national attention. And one of the beauties of that program is reach the size and scale where you do get the economies of scale. But much more importantly, you increase the size of the community so that you can build a bigger cohort. And then you can also build those social relationships and ingrain that with the students. So is that an option available also?
To what Scott was saying also, most of our other DIRG colleagues have their own programs, which is why we go to them. So they're not looking to share right now because they've kind of designed their program. We did reach out to Westport one year also because they had some work. They have a program at Fairfield, actually, thinking we could piggyback on that. They weren't able to, as much as they'd like to, they weren't able to take more into their cohort. But we certainly can look at it. But from what we've shared, even when we looked at Fitch, if you remember, everyone had their own program and they weren't sharing, but we did leave it open. You know, when we first designed Fitch, we said we would take students from other districts.
We became pretty close to
Yes,
getting some as
we
well.
did. And we do go to other public schools for some of our students. So,
Okay.
but certainly, and we are fans of Clemson also. Thank you for sharing
No,
that.
I wasn't calling that out.
Everyone has seen 60 Minutes recently, all sort of things, but what's extraordinary about that example, and to Scott's point about building community, it's in their community. And if you look at the success of students that are operating, that are fully employed in a hotel, that beyond the social skills of thing, if you look at Richfield, I live in Richfield, look at Richfield, if you look at the Prospector and what that theater is and how that theater is staffed, and it is extraordinary what they built in the last several years. There is something that, although it's an investment in your community, of what it brings to your community. And we can tell you when we show you how many students we have over the next several years that will be part of that cohort in this community building it. So I think we'll get you those numbers, and that might have more, color to it.
Yeah, just one quick follow-up. I mean, we already have that developed here in this community with the housing, I think they call it Penny's Place now. So if we can't team with like a New Canaan, perhaps we can definitely, and you've talked about it with Chamber of Commerce, but broaden that extent in which we can collaborate in this community.
Thank you, John.
Thanks.
Okay. I wanted to clarify, I think that, Scott, you had said at the beginning that transportation costs were not included in this. Is that an extra cost, to be considered?
So in the initiatives, we did include the cost of an extra driver. So if this were to materialize, we would need another driver and another vehicle in order to accommodate like the vocation trips.
And can you just ballpark what that might be?
So the driver would probably be about 70,000 and then the vehicle about 75,000. If this were to come to fruition, then we would have to go to P and Z to amend the permit that we have for the number of vehicles on property.
Okay. And then just a higher level question. We had the initial presentation to the board on this program in March, and there were a lot of board questions that came from that, and there were a lot of references made to the work ahead of the committee, including thoughts on coming back to the board, on coming back to subcommittees multiple times. This is the next time since it's actually happened. And even in looking at this timeline, it seems that things have moved a lot along quickly since we have heard from anyone. And I'm also a little curious about the projected and future timeline. It seems that it's written a bit in a way as if it's already approved. And I'm just a little curious as to when we might receive some more detailed financials and where kind of the board is expected to get involved at a next step.
Can I respond? We don't see it as approved yet. Okay, we actually, we were hoping to have secure space, and it turns out the space we were hoping that I spoke to last time that would be adjacent to Fitch is not available, as much as Jerry would have liked to give that to us. We visited, we looked at it, Dr. Adley, Rich, myself, and Scott, and unfortunately, they're not going to be able to give us that space. So we really haven't secured a space. We have community members looking for us. We have other people that we know looking for it, but we have not secured a space. So we recognize that without a space, it's hard to move forward with the program. So I don't think we're taking anything for granted right now, that we know there's a timeline. We're very appreciative of those people out there looking for space. And we know that we haven't secured or it's not approved. We appreciate that. We're presenting a number of what space would possibly cost if we were able to secure it.
No, right. That I understand. I guess, it seems to me that it seems to me securing a space before something is approved is backwards to how I might imagine it. So I guess that's what that's the clarification I'm looking for. Like, what are I don't feel like I have clear financials or clear next steps.
And we're in a difficult position because of that. We agreed. One needs a space in order to ask for a budget, in order to have that, what goes with it. So we know that we're in a very small window before we can really ask for it. Short of clicking our heels 3 times and asking everyone we know if they can go out there and find us a space that's walkable, that's coachable, that allows our students to have something that's proper. And we know our window is small for that.
This may end up having to continue into the year, and not as a mid-year adjustment, but just for a continuation of this particular topic. I will say this too, thanks to all our special education staff, but this also provide, I know it's nearly an unsaid thing sometimes, but this also provide a sort of example of the conundrum a wee bit. This is a wonderful program. It's also, forgive me, it's an expensive program. The special education funds are increasing, and the competitiveness, I know we don't like talking about it so much, but the competitiveness for regular education dollars and special education dollars are significant. This is going to be, I think special education at the moment is over 1.6 of an increase in the budget. It was over 2 last year. And so this is a program, as an example, that is expensive at this particular point. But it might be a best practice, but it gives you it provides that little conundrum sometimes. Well, sometimes it does. It's just rising competition for dollars. But that being said, that's just a wee perspective. And this is not being presented as like we're having to make a decision on this right now.
Dennis?
Yeah, just a quick point. So when we do the financials for future, can we also just, I don't want to just do it based on the number of students we think may join or possibly join, but what's our capacity of this? And what does that look like? And so what is our scale, to John's point of, if we have 3, is that the same as having 10? Is it the same cost of us? And that, so it's a sunk cost for 1 year, but sunk is the wrong word, but I think you understand my point.
Yes. One of the critical components of this program is job or vocational training. What support are you planning for job training? And I ask that because one of the things I think transition programs typically struggle with is that the students go out on a job and it's actually more challenging for the employer and if the support is proper, that first off, getting the proper support, and second of all, making sure that support can help the student or person with a job. So long story long, how are we supporting kids to make sure that they are successful on different jobs that they might undertake?
I'll do the quick overview and I'll turn over to Scott on who want to add to it. So our 3 paraeducators, which is what our design is, will be supervised and will be trained by the special education teacher in terms of coaching. Coaching not only formal coaching, but language to use. The speech and language therapist will work with different social skills and how to train those paraeducators in doing that. We're doing pre-voc and mock-voc activities during the day. So not only are they trained on site, but they're trained prior to going out, whether they're working in a grocery store, a library, or a retail store. So it'll be both mock training, it'll be job training on site, as well as coaching from the paras outside, but they will be escorting them. Okay, Scott, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and it's so I think it's another essential reason and foundational framework of a in-district transition program is that ability to develop relationships with businesses where students who have unique profiles can be successful, and both providing the appropriate coaching and support for the student and also for the space. It's so important to make sure that the space is set up to ensure the student's success, and understanding how to work with an individual with a certain difference in a workspace. And so both of those pieces are really critical. And when we toured other programs, we heard a lot of really endearing stories about students who received internships and job sites within their community, continue to work in those same spaces for years and years later, including, one of our own students who went to a local transition program as part of an outplacement and continues to maintain the job in that other district, which again is really wonderful, but not obviously within the student's own community, which is our goal. So those job placements are critical. That's why we quickly reached out to the Chamber of Commerce to establish a relationship. They talked about how step one, if this is approved, that they would love to have an open house with us so that we could present their to all of the members of the Chamber of Commerce and explain how this is both a benefit to them and a benefit to us, and how important this is to us as a community in thinking about the inclusion of individuals with disabilities in the workforce.
Thank you. I have a comment, not a question, and that is that I just would encourage us to look at whether there might be different models in terms of the space, and that the space might be something that we scale up over time. I know activities of daily living are important and sometimes are a support for future job training, but not always. And so if there are ways to think alternatively about how to be successful, I think that's worth doing. Okay.
And I think that we saw that model sort of with FIT starting off in one space and then scaling up. And so that will be part of our review. Again, not securing a space without the proper processes happening first, but exploring spaces to provide those options.
Thank you. Okay, questions on the goals and outcomes? And just a timing question that those self-studies, what's our time frame on those?
Annual, we're working on them now, and we'll be able to report out hopefully by late spring.
Late spring? Thank you. Anything else? All right, thank you all. Yes, Robin.
Just one thought would be that because this presentation is so important and we usually get it in December, a few weeks before the budget, I just thought maybe it might be nice to have it in the spring, possibly at late spring, so that if we did have data requests or other thoughts about different things that we could do, we'd have more time in advance of creating budgets, et cetera, just because this is a big part of what we do. And it seems like it's rushed a lot of times when we are going through it in December. And I don't know the timing or if that would even work, but just that we don't feel rushed going through it in the midst of a lot of other initiatives as well.
So maybe we can ask administration to consider whether that would be a workable timeframe for them, and we could talk about that when we do the next master agenda. Thank you for the point. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. That will move on to the fall update on the district strategic plan and board goals.
Madam Chair, I will go through this quickly if you don't mind, given the time frame. Thank you to Mr. Maroney for the suggestion. At the time, if you may recall, we included the progress of the color code, but we also included here, we kept the evidence. So what you see for the first goal, move that forward, please. The actual in black is actually what we said for evidence, and we just updated that evidence without giving a plethora of examples where we could. So I'm not going to be honest, I'm not even going to read any of this, right, and point it out. It's so quick for you to read even now if you haven't already had a wee chance. So we just updated those. Most of them, for the most part, are yellow because we're just in the first trimester really of it. But anyway, I'll leave it at that, Madam Chair, if you don't mind. And
That's
if you want to
fine.
go through it, that's fine.
No, we can just take questions. Questions on goal one? None. Oh, sorry. I moved fast today.
The data dashboard, was that approved by the board as is?
No.
Currently it's a draft.
So this says that it's ready to be displayed on the district website.
Yeah, but it's still a sort of, it's draft, so we're still sitting in a wee bit of limbo until we decide what we want to do with it.
So is that coming back to the board?
I would have to work through with the board leadership to decide what way we want to handle that. We're ready to sort of like bring it back if we want to bring it back.
Okay. Does anybody want me to approve the data dashboard?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Are you asking if we need to approve the data dashboard?
We don't have too much more work to do.
One last review.
Yeah, it's finished. Finished or you're almost?
More or less, please. Yeah. We can bring it back to the next meeting if that's, yes.
I think we saw a draft, but it was on the screen and we didn't have a printout. And it would just be helpful. I think if the full
we can do
board
that.
could see it in, entirety. That would be a helpful.
We can do that,
thing to
yeah.
see.
Great. Okay, so we'll take a look at it next meeting. Okay. Goal 2. No questions? Goal 3. Goal 4. Goal 5. Strategic plan goals. Goal area 1.
Dr. Fettigan, if there are any questions, you can take them or unless you want to point something out. If you want to just go through it, Madam Chair, the same way or?
I think, given the hour, if there's any quick highlights, that's great, but otherwise, let's move pretty quickly. Okay, all right, anything? Yeah, go ahead.
Just one question, and I'm going off my notes and I'm not sure what bullet point this referred to, but it just improving tier 1 core instruction for all students to meet individual student needs. It seems that much of the evidence is focused on MTSS, IEP, SRBI. And the question I have is, I'd love to see evidence also geared toward the general ed students and how we are designing instruction to meet the needs for those students as well, because a lot of the evidence is very specific toward some of the IEP, MTSS, SRBI.
Just a quick response to that. For example, the focus on K-3 literacy is going to be a very important conversation as we continue into the winter and spring, and that will obviously be our core literacy program. And it is important to note that MTSS, formerly known as SRBI, is a general education program.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else on goal 1? Thank you for this format. It's easy to read. Goal 2. Anything to highlight?
Simply that we have our school-based teams convening to look at the data of the school climate plans, and those will be submitted to Dr. Dad by December 31st, with information to be shared with each of the school communities and posted on the website.
Okay.
It's not on here, right? But one of the things I shared with the staff today is that I'm particularly grateful for this year is the sense of belonging that we provide to our students in each of the buildings. You want a global response to the actual goal itself.
Okay.
I'm honestly proud of that.
Thank you. Goal area 3. Okay. Goal area 4.
You can see that 3B, we consciously put down there as red. Okay, so we got a wee bit of work to do there.
Okay.
I just maybe one highlight on expanding the professional capacity of staff is to note that we have initiated an aspiring leader program that has convened twice yet. We'll have meetings throughout the year to support teacher leadership and thinking about a pipeline for future leaders who come up through the DPS system and other positions. So that's exciting.
Great. We were looking for that. Thank you. Anything else in 4? Will you be reporting back any preliminary data on that Aspiring Leaders Academy?
Yeah, we'd be happy to. We can perhaps do a presentation as well. That's something that you talked about with Dr. Adley.
Okay.
To provide an overview.
Okay, thanks.
We have currently, I think, 28 participants from across the system. Different schools, grade levels, and departments represented.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Goal area 5. Any highlights?
Well, area 5, I would say one of the highlights is that communication plan has been drafted and discussed at length at the board table. And just an update on the progress report for elementary progress reports. The committee is meeting. We've been a little delayed in that project. So fall and winter, and we anticipate to complete revisions to share with the board in the spring.
When we said board presentation plan for communications plans, we just have to decide which board meeting we would bring that to.
Yes. Looks like we might have some room next meeting on the 10th.
And with regard to the progress report committee, we have teacher representatives from each of the schools, and we've worked with DEA as part of the MOU for the selection of teachers.
And just one clarifying question, just the need to revise the progress reports and grading. Can you just give a high level overview of why this is being changed?
Sure. So we wanted to take a look at better alignment to the standards, and actually one of the things that we'll have to do after even if we present revised progress reports, for example, in the spring of 2025, once we have our revised programming for literacy instruction, we'll want to make sure that there's alignment there. And sometimes, you'll hear me talk about when you make a shift in curriculum or instruction, you're simultaneously making a shift in assessment. That would also be how we're reporting out for student progress. So anytime you make a shift in one of those portions of the triangle, curriculum, instruction, or assessment, you need to consider the other points.
Is this mainly focused on elementary because of the K-3 literacy effort, or is it K-12?
It's elementary, but not only focused on not only K-3 literacy, but it is an elementary.
Mostly elementary. Okay, thank you.
There will obviously be a heavy focus on literacy in light of the recent legislation in science of reading.
Marge can just fill you in contractually about it.
Right. This was also a subject in the last negotiations, and although it's not a mandatory subject of bargaining, there is an MOU that said that it's a concern of the teachers to make the progress reports clear, especially at the elementary level. So we agreed to convene a committee as part of negotiation.
Okay.
Okay. Goal 6, highlights?
Oh, it's exciting to see some of this come together.
Good.
Goal 6.
Yeah, Dennis?
Recommendation, is that the facilities committee recommendation or is that the administration's recommendation?
Well, so far it's recommended, it's administrative at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Good clarification, Dan.
And then goal 7.
Goal 7, we just want to thank the board for the support with the Wacom devices for digital art. We've seen our students really enjoy using those in the digital arts courses for visual and performing arts. And we'll be working on a scope and sequence for K-5 library media curriculum, as I mentioned last year. That's scheduled for this year. We've also established a district technology newsletter that's been distributed to staff to improve communications internally with our tech programming and resources. And we also just have, I think we discussed this in our last board meeting, as far as the recommendation in the FY26 budget for a new student information system. I think the plan was to have more of a study year in the year ahead and postpone that potentially for FY27. I would also defer to my colleague Rich Rudolph if there's anything to add about that.
So the hope is to put some money in the budget for training. The responses on the staff survey for secretaries and administrators were a need for training, especially for those who come from other schools who have a different system and are not used to this system. And then resurvey staff to see if there's a desire to switch. And then if we switch, it would be a significant expenses switch and it'll be about a 2-year process.
Thank you all. Any questions before we close out that item?
There was just one other one I just wanted to point out, if I, it's okay. I don't know if Amy did say it or not. If you did, forgive me, I must have taken a moment. On number 1B, there's a progress chart link there, right, for the completion of the curriculum. So if you want to see what percentage of the curriculum is complete in any given category, discipline, it's linked there, and it should pop up.
Oh, great.
The various stages and where they are, and you know, you'll notice some there that are in better state than others, but it's all there.
I can't believe I forgot because this is one of the things that we talked at length about. I would also point out that you can expect as board members that I'll be coming back frequently, at least quarterly, with updates on this chart. Because one of the things that we're trying to do is ensure that curriculum projects happen throughout the year, because I don't think it's best practice to write curriculum primarily in the summer without sufficient time to review the artifacts that are coming in and to progress monitor the quality of the curriculum documents. And just there are different timelines and paces for each of the departments. So every time this is updated, probably, like I said, at least quarterly, we'll be sharing with the board. And also I would expect when we hear from department chairs during their curriculum committee reports that you would also see whenever there's been an update or change.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you all for the work. Next item, discussion on October 2024 financial report and possible action on proposed budget transfers. Rich.
So this is the financial report through October. We are forecasting a slight deficit of $7,749, with the general education RCs a positive 140,000, and the special education RCs a deficit of 148,000. Overall salaries are forecasted at positive $218,000. Salary savings associated with some delayed hiring. The new salary schedule for the maintenance and custodial staff has yielded savings of just over 38,000. We've had some turnover and delayed starts in building subs, which has saved a little over 49,000. We have some step and level savings and some unfilled clubs and councils. And then we had some delayed hirings for the unfilled occupational therapists, which have now recently been filled. Next, operating costs are a deficit of 229,227, and those relate to special education contracted services, which we do have a transfer for that we're recommending. Fixed is a positive 2,861. We have a small reimbursement from KERMA for workers' compensation, and then some slight savings in payroll taxes due to vacancies. So overall this month, we have 3 transfers recommended. The first is for 135,100 into special education for consult services. And we are recommending taking the funds from some savings in building subs, some salary savings in a groundskeeper, an assistant principal, and an SSO, some small savings in equipment, some step and level savings for clubs and councils, that small credit from KERMA I mentioned, and the new salary schedule for a new carpenter. The second transfer is for 19,475. That is to move, I'm sorry, for 39,475. That is to move money into contracted OT, which was used to backfill the vacant occupational therapists, which have now been filled. And last is contracted speech for 54,127. Again, we have that one SLP that remains vacant, as Shirley mentioned earlier. And so this is to take the salary savings associated with that vacant SLP and move it to contracted speech, which is covering that vacancy.
Okay. Any questions about the transfers or the contents of the report?
During the finance meeting, we came to a consensus to recommend the transfers to the full board.
Okay. All right. May I have a motion to approve the October budget transfers? That's Joanna, seconded by Robin. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Update on fiscal year 24 budget initiatives.
So the worksheet, I'll just talk quickly to the worksheet because you're probably going to get into this more in the next discussion a little bit, but Amy, well, like the K-3 literacy that we've truncated a little bit to 18 for the K-3 resources and not for 4 and 5. The work of that committee is going to be suggested that we extend the work of the committee, but I don't think this is for this particular meeting, but you see the modified amount, the budget would be recommended as that. $10,000 is a new cost for software licenses. So that has been modified since the last meeting. That's for EduPlanet. And if there's anything urgent you want to tell me, just let me know. Play-based learning, instead of the 50,000, that's for new monies. There's monies in play-based learning already in the budget. And this is actually new monies. Play-based learning could go ahead without the 39 if that was a decision we were made. Am I correct in that? I just want to make sure.
That is correct. So 39,000 is really for materials and resources. Regardless, we'll be moving forward with play-based learning as it's statutorily expected and also what we believe in for our young people. So there are some funds that have been requested in the RC19 budget for curriculum writing. And we've actually started some of that curriculum writing work with the FY25 funds. In January, we'll have a curriculum writing team meeting as indicated in the strategic plan. And then just one other comment about the literacy plans for K-3 literacy. We're looking forward to convening the curriculum committee meeting on December 4th, where we'll provide a lot more information about the work to date and the experiences of our staff and our next steps.
The PLC we'll be talking about this evening. There's $120,000 cost for that associated with that. That's about $56,000 of loss of revenue from breakfasts and a $64,000 cost for transportation. And we'll talk a little bit more about that this evening. The facility study, you know, as it stands at that 200,000, if we want to move forward with that, there's no other action at this point. The website design, they conducted a staff focus group around the website. The parent focus group is scheduled for December 2nd. There's also, that will be a parent focus group for both the website design and the student information system Aspen transition program we've just discussed, and we currently do not have a location for that. Student information system, again, the parent focus group is on the first day we come back from after the holiday, and Aspen, we're going to be looking at training involved in that, and if the district moves to Power School, it would be 300,000, but we're not planning to do that. The departmentalization suggestion was left behind a wee while ago. Team Talk are looking to seek 50%. That 107 has been reduced to 100. That's off today. And we're looking to seek at the most 50% of board funds and 50% of outside funds. That could be the opioid grant, it could be a community fund grant, a combination of the funds. So I'm looking for modifying that and trying to look for 50% of support from community funds, community organizations. And that's a quick one for you, just to status. We have these on every meeting, so.
Okay. Joanna.
Just one question about the Team Talk. I thought that when Kids in Crisis first presented this, or maybe I read it in the newspaper article last year when we were talking about bringing it to middle school, they don't want to go into a school unless they have 3 years guaranteed. So if this is only, if we can't find the outside funding for 50%, where does that leave us with that?
There is no guarantee with this. There's no guarantee made with any organization. So if we can't get, I'm advocating, or will advocate in the budget that the board considers paying 50% of this. But if we don't get the other 50%, then that wouldn't go forward unless the board to change.
Okay.
The board has to decide to do something first to start with. But if we didn't have the additional funds, they could decide to fund them or not.
And will the board get a presentation about how it's going so far, first 3 months of school?
Well, I think people generally, I don't know there was a Team Talk presentation, but then I don't think so in the actual schedule. It'll come probably as part of the just a budget presentation. I think people understand it's been at the high school to some degree. We would talk about the data and the success or other ways of it during the budget process.
Thank you.
You can look at the timing of
Yeah,
that.
you can look at the timing of it.
Other questions on the initiatives? Katie?
Sorry, just scrolling back up. I'm sorry, I lost my spot.
You're okay.
Oh, Amy, could you just give us like a really quick overview of what the materials and resources would be for the play-based learning and what kind of the impact would be if you were to run the program without them?
Sure. So one of the interesting things about play-based learning is actually the students are a part of making what are called props. So they're a part of making a lot of what they'll use during the play-based learning time. But we do believe that there should be parity across the classrooms, ELP and K, for things like kitchen sets and blocks, Legos. All of those things are what they should have. Sensory tables. Many times teachers will use sensory tables more likely if they have like a dry sand table and then a separate wet table. So those are just some of the items, and we would be requesting those for ELP in that 39,000 and kindergarten. We combined ELP into this instead of in RC 24.
Then the materials and things that you're talking about are really, they're not like disposables, like
No, they're
workbooks where it
durables.
would be year after year.
Yeah, they're durables.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Robin? Just one, is it possible that, I know parents are always donating things like those. And, is that a possibility, you know, if there is not the funding in this for the Legos or kitchen sets or things like that, or PTOs who are always looking for ways that they can help to spend the money that they are raising? It seems like it might be an opportunity potentially, and just a question.
Sure.
There's specific things that you really need.
Sure, I'm sure we've been very lucky and fortunate for not only the support of the board and these types of learning experiences for our kids, but also I was looking for Crystal. She's not here, but Joanna certainly is. I'm sure it's something that we can discuss with our CDSP representatives. We do meet with them monthly. And we can also think about phasing in, right, the priority items and build it over time. But they are durable items. They're not things that would need to be replaced year over year.
Okay.
And I think the most important thing is we want to ensure parity across all of the, 8 or 9 ELP classrooms and across the kindergarten classrooms throughout the district.
Go ahead.
No, that's okay.
Okay, other questions on the initiatives? Okay, PLC.
So this is the opportunity just to talk about what this professional learning proposal is all about. I will say that given the challenges of the core of the budget and where we're standing with facing some of the challenges, there are probably limited new things in the budget per se, right? That being said, this is one of the highest, if not the top priority, to support the professional learning of the staff. That's outlined also in a couple of places. It's outlined in the strategic plan. It's outlined in the NASC recommendations, the tri-state recommendations. Just a couple of things about it. Our schools must be places where adults learn as well as the students. In fact, they need to really learn side by side. So we have to, in my opinion, they have to support the professional learning of our staff. When you look at the timing of the State Department of Education, the number of hours that they allocate, like 18 hours you got to allocate. What they have for mandates, it doesn't even cover that. It forces school districts to make decisions about, okay, well, we won't have professional development this, we'll have professional development in this because we've only got so much time. So the time for staff and staff are looking for time. Just a couple of things that go along with this. I do think this is a good recruitment and retention proposal. It also supports a little bit, it touches on late start time a little bit, okay, because it advocates for additional time at the high school for our kids. And so I think that there's an opportunity there to look to sort of build that in. If you look at a lot of the OECD economic countries that are part of that organization, the more professional development that you have, you sort of see that the higher the level of student performance. So it's an investment you're making. For 64K for buses, I know it's 56 for loss of revenue, but in all due respect, I'm not considering 56 loss of revenue for breakfast as part of this, although I'm putting it in as a loss. To me, it's a small investment for a high rate of return. But that being said, there's logistics with it. There's considerations of it, and I'll let Amy just do a quick walkthrough for you.
Great. Some of the things that we'll talk about tonight are the rationale, the process that we've engaged. Microphone wasn't on. Our PDEC committee and thinking about expanding professional learning time. Some of the research that Dr. Adley already mentioned, how we would plan to use the increase of PL time. Some information about DIRT comparison. When you think about instructional time loss, it's a natural question. I've had experience in my previous district where we did expand professional learning time, and there was obvious discussion around instructional time and what is the impact of that? What is the cost benefit ratio there? As Dr. Adley mentioned, supports later start times. We've prepared a draft calendar. I want to emphasize this is a very drafty calendar. We certainly know it has not been approved by the board. We would also, although we've discussed this with several groups, we would want to have more thought put into that. And then the budget implication. Just again, one of the things that I like to think about with the core values, mission, and vision of the district is, as Dr. Adley said, we're learning organizations. So when we think about the values that we hope to impart for our students, we need to model these things and have our staff experience these things through all levels, administrators, teachers, everybody involved. Dr. Adley mentioned a little bit about why this investment, and it goes without saying that the first reason would be student learning outcomes. We really want to ensure that our staff we want to be leaders in the area of professional learning. We don't want to be last. So we wouldn't be first to the table to have a discussion around increasing professional learning time. So the PDEC process, we did develop a district survey because we wanted to seek feedback from our teaching staff preschool through grade 12 on the current use of professional learning time, how staff is experiencing that, and address any areas of need for additional time. The PDEC committee, which again has representatives from across the district, all schools, levels, and departments represented. A small subgroup analyzed the survey feedback. I want to also note that Marge Sion and Barry Palmer are co-facilitators of this work. I did see that Barry was logged on at least before, and certainly Marge, if you have anything to add, please at any point jump in. We did also want to see what is the professional learning time that other districts are committing to, and it most certainly is a commitment, the professional learning time. And then we looked at the survey responses to develop considerations for increased time for not only PLCs, the budget initiative document I know refers to PLCs. I think it's important that we look at this as an overall initiative for professional learning. PLC is one type of professional learning experience that sometimes is overrun through other competing priorities. So if we want to think about keeping our PLC time really pure and intended for the staff as it's meant to, teacher directed, this is something that we would need additional time to support. So what does the research say? There, I think, are 4 slides here. I could have given many other references for research. I tried to pull from some of the big, but we're talking about professional learning really needs to be ongoing, collaborative, certainly aligned to educator needs, but also aligned to what we're desiring to accomplish with student learning outcomes. John Hattie has done all kinds of work on the effect size of different strategies and different approaches in public school education. And what he notes is that there's an effect size of 0.6, which is actually a very large effect size. Professional learning is a significant predictor of student learning outcomes. We've also seen that the students who are assigned to strong teachers they have improved long-term life outcomes. So this is again something that you cannot necessarily readily measure in a student's preschool through grade 12 experience, but there is extensive and current research that talks about lifelong outcomes for our learners. Some additional data here. The other piece is that when you increase professional learning time and the quality of it, you have a collaborative school culture, a collaborative district culture. And so one of the things I would note is the school climate survey did have some questions around not only curriculum and instruction, but also professional learning. And so we're thinking about what is it that our staff is really looking for, and thinking about, again, how do we make sure that we are a learning organization, right? This is about learning and growth for all, not just our students, but staff as well. Dr. Adley already mentioned some of the international data, and it shouldn't be a surprise that the countries that maybe are outperforming the United States of America on national assessments like the PISA, are also those communities, national communities that have a different model for professional learning, increased time, and also probably models that have more teacher autonomy and more time dedicated to peer-based learning. That is something, incidentally, that we have heard from our PDEC committee and that came through on the survey, that our staff is really looking for time together to collaborate for their planning and analysis of student work and for thinking about instructional strategy. This is just some other international data. Japan, they do things like where they engage in lesson study, where teachers actually work on collaborating, developing lessons together, and then watching the lessons be implemented in classrooms and have a very tight reflection protocol to support continuous improvement. The other thing, just one other thing to note is PD cycles. So sometimes when we have professional learning in districts, we might have a professional learning day in January and then not again until February and then not again until, you know, the end of the year or August, really, of school opening. That doesn't create a lot of opportunity for continuity. One of the things that we would like to see is that there's professional learning that happens for the adult learners in the organization, and then there's that immediate opportunity to apply. So that's something that we would be looking to encourage. How would we use our time? Again, for increased teacher collaboration. One of the things that we want to make sure that we're focusing on also is the regular analysis of student data, but also so what are we going to do about the student data? What is the collaborative decision-making about how to improve practice toward student learning outcomes? So this is just a sampling of some of the Connecticut districts, some local and some a little bit further away. We didn't provide the level of detail around PLCs. We really tried to focus on the full day release time and the early release time. And you can see there's quite a range for the districts, but it is not uncommon to offer, again, early release time. For example, Wilton has 13 early release days that they report. What does the research say about the loss of instructional time? And this is something, again, that in this consideration, we would need to talk about and determine how we would be monitoring use of time and how we're managing to still accomplish what we need to in our classrooms, elementary, middle, and high school. There is, again, long-term national research that talks about long-term gains for students. For example, in that one meta-analysis that's the first referenced, a 21 percentile point gain on student achievement when the adult learners have more time to focus on their craft and practice. And this is, again, it's not just about time, it's really an investment. Sometimes you see the benefit of your investment immediate, and sometimes it's more of a delayed realization. So we do have to report annually to the Connecticut State Department of Education through this ED 165 report. We have to ensure that we have 180 hours of, 180 days of instruction and 900 hours, and that's reported by school. So I've just provided an example here of 22-23, and you can see that elementary, middle, and high, we are, of course, at the 180 days, and we exceed the number of hours that are required. So even with the proposal that, again, is just one draft proposal for consideration, we would still be well above the number of required hours in the State Department of Education. So what might this look like? We've talked with PDEC, we've talked with our K-3 Literacy Steering Committee, we've talked with many different groups, of course, our administrative team, and different groups throughout the district of what would they like to see? What would be helpful in the way of professional learning model? So one of the recommendations could be that we could maybe consider continuing the 6 full professional days we have. Remember, we do have 1 additional day that's a full teacher work day, and perhaps adding 5 2-hour early release days, ELP through grade 12. These are, again, examples of days where they might work well. We would, again, want to have a more thoughtful discussion within the district and, of course, at the board table. But the idea here is that these are days that we think would be least impactful for families, and also days that would allow us to have continuity of when we offer professional learning direct application. You would note here that we've not suggested a January day because we already have a full day in January, same with February. We were also thinking that we might benefit from having additional 8 days of PLC time at the high school. They currently have 10 days, 10 2-hour delayed openings. So we would consider, and I know Mrs. Dunn has also advocated strongly for additional PL days on top of the 10. This is a draft calendar. It's hard to read here, but I know it was in your packet as an attachment. So it might be easier to view online or certainly on a printed copy. But this is just what that could potentially look like if we were to add those dates.
Can I just talk to that real quickly? The yellows with the cross through them are for like half days. Again, we're not going to be fixated on any one particular day, and it could be done better or otherwise. You'll notice that the PLC days at the high school has gone to Monday at the recommendation of the high school. A Monday being that they can do the cycle of the learning and then implement it right away, as opposed to Friday, the teachers working and then not being able to implement it like till next week. So that was the thought behind that. I didn't note the additional ones. I just put 2 green ones each month equal to the 18. So half of them are already there and half of them are new. And then the yellow with the line through them are the potential early release dates.
So we've already talked a little bit about the budget implication here. For 120,000 is the transportation, but some of that is the food sales. Again, there were already funds that are, of course, written year over year as requested in the budget for curriculum writing and professional learning. So those funds would be tied to this. We'd be able to advance that work in maybe a different way. It's one of my favorite researchers in education, Michael Fullen, what he's saying about when teachers feel supported. So again, one of the things that we would like to do is, if approved, we would want to work very closely with PDEC, which is our Professional Development Evaluation Committee, to decide what would this time look like so that it's ensured to best meet the needs of our staff. And we did also provide a glossary here.
So if
And we didn't talk about that, by the way, ahead of time. We did that separately.
If I could just add just a wee thing to the end of this. So there's the big umbrella of professional learning. We do PLCs in the district, and we would have to do certain amount of that with more fidelity. But that being said, we can accomplish. This is also taken into consideration the 3 hours in the contract. So we are using the 3 hours that are in the teacher's contract. So we can satisfactorily do the PLCs at the elementary school during the day, at different times during the day that we can do that. We can also do it at the middle school. We can't do it at the high school. It's not possible to implement it at the high school schedule wise or otherwise. So that's why the high school gets the extra 8 days. So as far as the elementary schools are concerned and the middle schools, they would be looking at the half days. I will say this, my general sense of talking to the core review team, talking to department heads, administrators, teachers in the Leadership Academy, and you also had PDAC. My sense is that, and I don't want to speak for Mrs. Dunn or the high school people, but I'm going to. My sense is from there that, yes, but we can't have you guys pushing in and doing this, like, sort of like just pushing in with your own agenda with this. I'm happy with some defined autonomy as long as we agree on it. I think there'll be plenty of reason to agree on it's about kids, curriculum instruction, assessment, and intervention for kids in that cycle. One of the things, by the way, in the PLC, I would share with you that if you look at the literature in PLCs over the last 20 years, they've done a very poor job of saying what a PLC should be in a high-performance school or a high-performance school district. I'm quite happy to sit down and actually literally define that by giving some of the staff at the high school their autonomy. We can't be saying, giving them the time and then just hijacking the time on them. Anyway, I'll just leave that just for a wee bit of context.
Dave.
Thank you, Amy. Again, Alan, picking up where you left off on teacher autonomy, that's the Finland slide. We have references to teacher professionalism. Amy, if you would, think about teacher professionalism, teacher autonomy, setting them free to do their best work and collaborate and work together versus we have EduPlan and we're standardizing things. We're getting curriculum nailed down. We're trying to really get everything the same across everything. Maybe there's a discrepancy, not right now, like come back to some writing or something later, but just like, is there a conflict there? Am I seeing this wrong? Would love your insight on it. Thank you.
Sure, quickly.
So just really quickly, curriculum, there should not be variance. in the sense of we need to be tightly aligned to the standards. However, we do want to ensure that there's teacher autonomy to some degree and being really responsive to the kids in front of them in their classrooms. So something that would be really helpful is thinking about providing professional learning on high quality instructional practices. So that kind of shows they're aligned, but there isn't a conflict of interest.
I guess not a conflict, but let's say there's autonomy and they work and they're creative and they have this great thing, like how do you propagate it back up through the system versus what's being pushed down? So again, probably not for tonight, but just high level. Thank you.
Okay. Katie? A couple of broad thoughts. I'm curious about the plan for the additional days. If we don't know yet what would be happening on those days, if that's still to be developed, I'm wondering what's driving us to say that we need more days. And I would also say, looking at the breakdown, there was a lot of good information in here. So I appreciate the charts and the comparisons that are in there. And it does look like we already have a lot compared to most of our peers. And I'm curious about the impact on the community and specifically parents. 18 PLC days is a lot. And when I look at that calendar, that's a lot. And I know, it is interesting when we talk about the impact on students, the impact on families. I find PLC days to be like very impactful to my day, and not in a great way. I will say that when I'm driving my kids to school, they actually talk to me in the car versus days when they don't. But I think that, for that to be effective, that's more of the long-term start time. So I don't think that one Monday sleeping in is going to solve that problem. Yeah, and then the loss of instructional time is significant to me. I appreciate that you put the number of hours in there, Amy, and that we're above that, but 8 additional days, at 120 minutes a day, we're looking at close to 1,000 minutes of instructional time. And I know that when I think about, what I want for my kids and when they're going to DHS, like, you want them to have study skills, you want them to retain their curiosity and their inquiry, but you want them to learn from their teachers. So that's a hard trade-off for me. Okay, thank you. Robin.
And I share some of the same thoughts that Katie has, just in terms of the comparison to the DIRG, for instance. We have something similar, it seems, to Wilton, but we're higher than all of the other districts in terms of the existing number of PLC days and hours that we have. And so if we were going to then add on to that 8 additional PLCs for the high school to get a total of 18, the numbers just don't, it's not intuitive to me why we would need that when our DIRG currently seems to have, like, we have more than what they have. And I know it's apples and oranges a little bit, but I was just looking at 6 full professional learning days and then the 10 PLCs at DHS, which kind of compare to early release days. But if you look at it in terms of the number of hours and days, we, I think, are only really comparative to Wilton, and we have higher than all of the other districts. And so that's just a question. I also share concern about the instructional time, and I understand you're right. If you have really effective teachers who are excellent at how they teach and instruct, that does have a significant impact on students. But with the loss of all those minutes and 8 additional PLCs at the high school, I'm a little concerned because I think some of the instruction and inconsistency we're not necessarily teaching as well as we could in all of the classes. And I know maybe you're trying to address that by having this, but it's just a concern I have. And then also that potentially more important is if you're going to add the additional PLCs, who is going to come up with the content and run the PLCs? Are those going to be teachers or teacher leaders? Are they going to require extra pay in order to do that? And what is the time taken away for them to actually plan and effectively create high strategy, like, high import material on a biweekly basis. Because my fear is that having that additional work in order to really make it meaningful will take away time from time that they would have otherwise be spending potentially grading student projects, getting things back timely to students to give them instruction on papers and projects and feedback. Because you're going to take certain time out of their day just to prepare these things for the teachers. So there are different elements, and that's more of an operational one, but just something I want to get your thoughts.
So I think there are obviously there's a discrepancy of slightly, every district approaches it differently. Wilton, for example, I think you had mentioned Wilton, they have 6 professional learning days that we do, but they have 13 early release days. So that's a little bit different.
Right, but I was saying we have 10 PLCs, they have 13. The number of hours are similar. One's at the start of the day, one's at the end of the day, and I think it's because they have a late start, and so they're probably doing early release because they already implemented late start like 20 years ago at the high school. But I think just in terms of hours, that's the closest that I could get to versus the other districts.
And just really quickly about the PLCs and who's running them. PLCs are currently run at the high school by the teachers. PLCs are intended to be teacher run and teacher driven. So one of the things that we know is that teachers would be using that time together again to look at student work samples. So the PLC is not intended to create extra work. It's supposed to be working on work.
Okay.
If I may just say, because those are all real good concerns, right? I'm not going to address them all, but if I could just address one of Katie's. We know exactly what the teachers would be doing for PLC at the elementary school and the middle school completely. We know what exactly. In fact, many of the teachers are doing them, although to some degree they're not because they don't have the time because the meetings get used for other things for the district and things that they have to do. So, but we do know exactly that model and when we present that model. All I'm saying at the high school is I'm just appreciating a wee bit of a different nuance. And around the tenets of the PLC, I'd be willing to engage in a discourse where they are invested in certain parameters, but with flexibility. I'd be willing to sit down and have that discussion because some defined autonomy around there I think is important. But I want to make it clear, like around PLCs, we know exactly what that model would be.
So 2 additional comments. The strategic plan calls for us to define the protocols for PLCs more consistently across the district, and that's very important work. Something that we're working on this year and will involve the PDEC committee. They'll be very closely connected to that. The 5 requested days at the elementary level, for example, would be used to support primarily literacy instruction. And thinking about the science of reading, one of the things that was resounding during the November 5th PL when I participated with the elementary teachers is they need more time across the district within their grade levels. So for example, how can we have dedicated time for grade 1 teachers to meet together? So that would be more easily facilitated during that with that kind of model.
Just one clarifying question. On the one where you show the potential model, what this would look like. I'm a little confused about what exactly we would be talking about doing because this potential model does not talk about 8 additional high school PLC days. And so I'm just trying to understand what we're actually saying would be part of that $120,000 cost. Or if we haven't decided.
Yeah, that should be in there.
It should be
Robin.
there,
Sorry, I
but it was meant to
apologize.
say-
That should be in there. Robin.
It was meant to say current 10 plus 8.
So what's in the budget initiative, 120,000 for 5 early release days, K-12 plus 8 additional PLC days at DHS? Okay, but this isn't updated to reflect, is that the issue?
Yes.
That's
just
an
a
oversight.
Right, so it's Brenna, then Dave, then Joanna.
Thank you. I am in strong favor of increasing the amount of PLC days that we have at our school because for our school community, they're much less of a loss than they are a pocket. And I think that's really how we view them. I don't know if Ryan wants to jump in on this at all, but I mean, that's time to go take a test, attend a Theater 308 homecoming celebration, attend a club council meeting that our club leaders come together and work collaboratively, similarly to the way that the teachers come together. And so for the students, these pockets are not only spaces to breathe, sleep in if they need to, but I mean, everybody's up. Everybody's up in many senses. we're busy with work. And so these pockets, again, I don't really like the idea of referring to them as losses. They might be less minutes in the classroom, but they're not less minutes on campus, becoming active in many other ways that are so valuable as we advocate for and support in the community.
Thank you. Dave?
That slide we were sitting on for a little bit of the different days and the different release date, like, I don't know what those means hour-wise by district. Could we get a breakdown and gross it up by district?
Yes.
Thanks.
Can you repeat that, please?
He wants to see the hours.
Can you-
That slide.
It's hard to translate that slide.
Yeah, I
with
know
all
what a
the rows.
release day is, 2 hours here and 3 hours in Wilton. and-
Okay, the
Yeah, so
number of
like that
hours.
breakdown and then gross, so I can just see. you know,
Yes.
we
Yeah,
have
we'll-
100, they
we'll-
have 10.
We'll refine some of it because sometimes we look at the calendar, we ask the assistant superintendent, and that person tells you one thing, and the superintendent tells you another thing. Literally, so we have to go down and make sure we fine tune.
Yeah,
Just,
Joanna
Sorry.
Smith, yeah.
Thank you for what you said about the potential lost instructional time. What I'm really wondering is what, if we could see some data on what we have now. What happens right now in PLCs? How much time is lost or gained? I feel like we're talking about something as if we don't have anything, but we do have things in place. We're not starting from zero. So I would really like to understand exactly what we already have before we talk about a potential high cost where we're also like, not to skip ahead, but we're talking about really serious matters in the very next item on the agenda. So to ask us to put something in with such a high cost without understanding what we already have and how is that working or not working is really hard for me.
So, yeah, I think some greater definition around what a PLC is would be helpful. And what they're used for at the different levels. I agree with that. Who's next? Ryan, then Robin.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there a certain minimum that is needed for PLC days per month? Because I see there's about 2 every month, 2 to 3. Is it possible that those days could be merged together to sort of create like a day off and create an environment for students where rather than splitting like 2 lessons in 2 different half days, they rather have 1 full day to get the full curriculum that they're seeking to get?
So, Rana, and that's a great question. Part of the reason that it's separated like that because the teachers have to do a teaching cycle through the process, so they can't all just do it at the one. If they did it for like September, the first week, and didn't touch it again until October, too much time has gone by. They haven't come back. They haven't done interventions with students, so they have to complete the cycle. But it's a great question.
Thank you.
And we also have to have 180 school days.
Yeah.
Robin.
Just a financial question. So initially, this initiative had the 219,000 to 500,000, but now is the cost, it's at 120,000?
Yeah, we changed how many days, reduced the days.
Okay, but the 120 is what we're
Yeah.
looking at right now. Okay, thank you.
All right. So an intro to a possible PLC initiative. Thank you. We certainly cannot follow up. And there are follow-up items from today. Okay. All right. Thank you all. We'll move on to the update on the what are we on? Discussion of fiscal year 26 budget planning documents and Board of Education guidance to the superintendent. I spoke at length at the start of the meeting about the budget process. The goal of this discussion is to provide quantitative and qualitative guidance for administration for their budget development this evening. I will emphasize the Board of Education remains committed to providing the best possible education for our students and shares the community's desire to prioritize student needs and programming. To ensure the long-term health of our district, we must carefully review all options and make informed choices. This process involves balancing competing priorities and making difficult decisions. While we're working to provide a starting point that takes into account Board of Finance tax strategy, and thank you, Jim, for being here this evening, this is still the beginning. Developing and adjusting a budget will still be an ongoing process with careful planning, flexibility, and a commitment to balancing priorities. Okay. Rich is going to walk us through the documents briefly. We'll take any questions and then we'll discuss the actual guidance. This discussion should be fairly high level, not evaluative, as our last PLC discussion was, for example. Go ahead, Rich.
So just to start with the document that was left on everybody's desk, it does show the last 10 years of increases for the Board of Education budget. The high was actually this current fiscal year at 4.73. The low was in fiscal year 20 at just over 2%, and the average was 3.12. If we move to the pro forma, which we've talked about in the past, it was briefly mentioned that the current core expenditures rolling over essentially what we're doing this year into next year's at 5.9. If we look at the two mandates, the K-3 reading program and play-based learning, gets you to about 6.11. And then all the initiatives that we've talked about, whether it be the facility condition survey, Teen Talk, EduPlanet, the website, PLCs that we just heard about in the transition program. If you were to do all of those, you're getting to about 7.19%. We did include a sensitivity analysis in the packet, ranging anywhere from 3% to 4.75%. 4.75 was picked as it's essentially the budget you received in the current fiscal year. And then 3 was the low end guidance by the Board of Finance. And then on the chart, you can see what reductions would have to be made from the pro forma to the pro forma with mandates, and then the pro forma if you were to do all the initiatives. And obviously the more initiatives you do, the higher it is. So those reductions could be anywhere between 3.4 million to 5 million. On the low end at 3%, and on the high end at 4.75%, 1.4 million to 2.9 million. We did include 6 years of actuals broken into different categories. And not to go over all the categories, but just to highlight some, the teachers, and that's inclusive of classroom teachers, special education teachers, speech therapists, et cetera, have gone up about 2.5% over that time frame. There was a question earlier about how many speech therapists we've added. So it's since 2020, we've added 4 speech therapists. If we look at the administrators, that category has gone up 5.4%. That jump is largely the conversion of the SES facilitators to the SES assistant principals. The two big initiatives or two big driving expenses over the course of that time have been the mental health initiatives, which is inclusive of the psychologist, director of mental health, Teen Talk, social workers, and the wellness center, has gone up about 6.25%, and then security just over 16% in that same time. Special education has gone up 4.64%. There was a question about paras earlier. We have added 24 paras since 2020, and you can see in that category, it is one of the larger growth areas, though within the last couple of years, out-of-district tuition has primarily been the large driver in special education. A number of other items that we categorize have been relatively low: nursing support, secretarial support, and then instructional or supervisory para support. Technology has been relatively flat. Athletics in that same time period has grown about just under 6%. That is largely due to transportation costs. It is also a little bit skewed because we did have COVID. We did have COVID in the years of fiscal 20 and 21, so you did not spend transportation like you normally would. We did add, though, 10 coaches in that time period as well. Clubs and councils does show a large increase. However, that is largely due not due to new clubs, but more step and level changes. The one club that was added in that time period was robotics. Home to school transportation has increased largely due to the contract by Federal Student. And then there was a bus added a few years ago for the Fitch Avenue area. One of the other primary drivers of budget increases over time has been benefits, largely health insurance. We are seeing a large health insurance increase of about 12% for next year. That is in line with a lot of other districts. I know Ridgefield's initial quote is 14%. So we're seeing similar increases as our neighboring districts. In total, the average increase over the last 5 years from spend to budget has been about 3.4%.
Point of information?
Pardon?
Point of information?
Yes.
So I've seen a 3.5 starting point and a 3.0 starting point in the sensitivity analysis. It's a 3.0 we're working off of, correct?
So we did update it to go from 3.0 all the way to 4.75.
Okay, that's the correct one.
Yes.
Thank you, Rich.
Okay. Any other questions on the documents so far? Alan, do you want to touch on the efficiencies document?
Tiers. So the document that you should be looking at is has the tiers on it. So it's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. What does this actually show? Well, it just sort of shows like a range in some cases, a financial range of what a possible saving may be. This is not a budget presentation, but if you're asking me like, okay, so where are you going to be looking for? The board asks, where would you potentially look for? So tier one would be the new initiatives, right? So those are, can you just put that up, Cass, please? The tiers, if you wouldn't mind, right there. Okay. So these are the topics that we've been discussing now for some months, and so you can see the total of that, and whether some survive, whether some are in there, that remains to be determined. I would say that the professional learning one is the top priority, but again, those you've seen those. I know some of those have been modified tonight, and we're in the initiative document that we discussed a little bit earlier with a modified number. For instance, play base was 30, 39, and 50. Non-facing. Now, what's non-facing to you? Might not be non-facing to me, but might be non-facing to somebody else. So I just put a wee bit of wriggle room here, okay? If you're considering a secretary, I'm just giving an example. I shouldn't even pull that example out, but anyway, if you're considering that facing or non-facing, I'm considering really in the classroom per se as student facing. That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. But there's some nuances to this. I would look at pushing out the replacement cycles for athletics, uniforms, technology cycles, and anything else that had a replacement cycle. Administrative and supervisory staff. Again, administrative staff, you could say is student facing, but I guess I'm counting in the classroom as student facing. So that administrative is administrators, right? And supervisory staff. We have a number of supervisory positions, director positions. So that is that particular bracket. Student facing, this is going back to class size. Now, if there is no intent to look at class size, okay, you may say, why are you bringing this up again? This is a policy thing, right? I just want to be clear, right? It's an opportunity, and it's an efficiency. I would certainly consider 25 to class. It's not going to change the middle school. If it changed some of the elementary schools, it probably, I think it's like 3 FTEs we would save. But if you're changing it, I just want the board to understand, like, this is on my mind. If you don't want to do it, I know this whole discussion about policy, but this wouldn't be a big deal to change policy in this, okay, if you had to. We've had this discussion before. It's not going to come up in the budget unless you sort of, if everybody around the table says we've had enough of this from last year, then okay, then I'm not going to do it, right? I'm not even going to look at it. What's the point? But I would ask you to at least keep the door open, given what we have to actually do here. Minimally enrolled clubs, programs, clubs, and sports. I'm not going to answer what those are, right? At this particular point, that would just be completely inappropriate. But if you think, what are the clubs, sports, and programs that the kids are doing that have low numbers of students in them? I'm not saying that they're not important, but everything's important. So I have to look somewhere. And then staffing, eventually staffing. We can do the attrition. We still have to finish off a couple of teachers in terms of that attrition, and then certified and non-certified staff. I'm not going to begin to talk about who they are. That would be totally inappropriate, and it's not the budget time period. So those are the tiers. I could fluctuate between tier 1 and tier 2. It's not like, okay, I'm going to do all of tier 1 first and then go to tier, and that's not what I would do. I would certainly be selective over these particular tiers. So that's the best that our team can do to give a wee bit of a sense to the board of some sense of how we might approach this.
Okay. Great, that's helpful. Go ahead, Joanna.
I am not at all in favor of changing any of the classroom ratios. And I've sat in this room for 5 years. People have been on this board for years and years and years. Changing policy to, back into a budget number is not what the board has ever said they wanted to do. And I feel like, you're asking us to teach the teachers more, but you're telling us, here's a way to take some away to save some money. So I feel that's very contradictory as well.
So to be clear, if the board gives me a guideline of 8% or something, then I can do I can do whatever I have to do, right? I mean. at
You're
some
not getting
point-
8%.
I understand that. But I have challenges here. I actually, like, I've always said to you, that going from 24 to 25, in my opinion, doesn't change anything, right? I think that's an adult problem, not a kid problem. But that being said, I understand your point of view, but something, you're not gonna, look, there's something that you're not gonna like here, right? I mean, it's gonna impact our kids. If we have to get down to where we gotta get down to, everybody around the table is gonna have an opinion about it. It's not gonna be pretty.
Well, what are the other things you've looked at that are not taking
This is what I've
teachers or
looked-
raising, so this is it? This is
Well,
everything you've
those
looked
are the broad, I mean, those are the broad categories, right? Those are the broad categories. It's not a, what I don't want the board to hear, okay, that was never in there and that showed up in the budget. Like, I mean, there needs to be a wee bit of flexibility and understanding in this process, because this is a different type of process we're using.
Sorry, just one more thing. I just want to understand why you go directly to in classroom things.
I didn't. I haven't gone directly to that. I'm just.
Theoretically, I mean, putting this policy in here, but you didn't talk about 20 other things that have been said over the past 3 years, the things that we looked at. So I'm just wondering why we've gone directly to teacher ratios.
I haven't gone directly to teacher ratio. Actually, for the record, if a board member has a better idea than we have, I'm happy to listen to it. I honestly, I haven't gone to that. It's just, I just want to test the waters. Is this something that you want to look at or not look at? Because if you don't, there's no point, my team wasting their time on actually looking at it, and considering it. If it's not that, it's going to be something else that somebody's not going to like, right?
Dennis.
Yeah, so I think we're at this point where people aren't gonna like whatever you put up, right? So someone's gonna like it, someone's not gonna like it. I will say, I think, and I'm trying to reference my memory, is the Board of Education changed this class policy the year maybe Jill joined the board, or the year before I did, so 7 years ago. And honestly, I don't see our test scores have changed positively or negatively by changing that. So going back to what we had in 2016, I don't think it's a terrible idea if we can save a lot of money to do so. So I would be in favor of looking at this.
Katie?
Thank you. I have a lot of thoughts on this, but first I just want to respond to Dennis's point. And I do think that metrics can be helpful into, helping us determine what our best course of action. I also agree with Joanna. I don't like the idea of sort of backing into a policy to back into a budget number. All of that is counterintuitive to how, I would like to see us be looking to meet our student needs. So from a big picture standpoint, we have a couple of overall drivers to this budget that I think that we're all aware of, right? We know that healthcare is a major component of this. And Rich has said in the past that it's cyclical, right? That oftentimes we'll see high times for a couple of years. So since we're in that right now, we're facing budget constraints and we have to have these difficult conversations. So some of these initiatives, Alan, that you're bringing forth, and, I love your, kind of like dreaming of the ideal situation. I do think that some of those things are going to have to wait for those times when we are at the other end of the cyclical component of that. Special education is another large driver of our budget, and special education costs what it costs because we need to meet our students' needs, and I will always advocate for them. However, what we had in 2016 in terms of class sizes, to your point, Dennis, and what we might be looking at, it's really, really hard for me to think how we might be increasing classroom sizes, and especially at the elementary level. It's really hard for me to think that that's not going to exacerbate our number of kids that are going to need additional support services. And I fear that, we talked about this before, I fear for some of the unintended consequences of some of these things. We have, very young children who will likely be learning to read through a new program, in a curriculum that's currently being thought of and developed by their amazing teachers, right? So how are we going to ask those teachers to squeeze in a few extra kids, especially those early kids that we don't really know so much about academically and we're finding out about. I worry that we're going to create other pockets there. So I don't have a good feeling about that. I think that there are a couple other things that we have talked about off and on for a few years as well. These are the things that I would like to be talking about in terms of what do we as a district want to do? What do we as a district think is best for our students, our community overall? And then figure out the money on it too and think about those efficiencies. So for example, department chairs, and I hate to say it, but have come up every budget season back and forth. And last year we added another layer of administration that, you know, maybe undercut their position a little bit. And I wonder if, you know, having a conversation about the administrative structure outside of the budget season would help us better know so that we're not coming in throwing spaghetti here. Another thing that, you know, we've talked about, and this is even harder to talk about than the department chairs that come up every year. But we've added departments to our annual budgets as well. And I think that sometimes when we add things as a one-off, it's really easy to get excited about a program. And then it becomes an annual cost that makes our percentages rise and rise year after year. And I think we have to look back to those, you know, to Joanna's point about that long list of things. Security is one of those things that is showing on, you know, Rich's list at 100% increase. And I want to say very clearly that the safety of our students and staff is paramount. And we are really fortunate to live in a town that enjoys a wonderful partnership with our local police department. And the community has shown support for this increase of security at the elementary level. But the financial requirements to support that program do not seem tenable anymore under the current budget constraints that we're experiencing. And I wonder if it might be time to renew our partnership with the town, just as the town owns the public school buildings. So perhaps could the town oversee the security of those buildings? And perhaps that might align our interests a little bit easier from both a financial and from an operational standpoint, and that Darien Public Schools could focus, you know, on the business of educating schools, and Darien Police Department, you know, could focus on the business of protecting its citizens. I think that might be an opportunity. Okay.
John.
So I think we're already getting down wormholes, and this was supposed to be a discussion on guidance, and we are now facing some fiscal constraints, which I'm very thankful to the Board of Finance that started the process and gave a very transparent and collaborative type discussion at its last meeting. And during that last meeting, they set 3 to 4% guidance. And when you work through that math, as done in Rich's work on the sensitivity analysis, as we discussed at our Board of Finance meeting to get, the Finance Committee meeting, to get to the tie end of that range, we have to find $2.5 million off of the pro formas while meeting any new mandates. That does not include any new initiatives. So instead of spending tonight trying to figure out what the priorities of the administration are, I think tonight's discussion should be whether or not we give guidance. And given the discord that last year's process took us, and the amount of work and needless work it took this administration and the central office, and the discord in the community and amongst our staff, I would say we stay away from the prioritization exercise tonight. We ask the administration to tier certain elements. And again, none of us are going to like this. There is no easy answer. Again, I said it. We got rid of budget control. We did the Y contract. We have basically turned over every rock to find a honeypot, as I called it. There are no more honeypots left. So everything we are looking at, no one wants to do. But as a town's fiscal authority, they have determined a tax policy that has been within 3 to 4%. So I think this board should act responsibly, listen to its fiscal authority, and give some guidance to this administrative, both qualitative and quantitative, to come in near the range in which the Board of Finance has dictated. That does not mean we cannot advocate during our budget process for some of these new initiatives, some of the spending. But to sit here tonight and try to figure out this $2.5 million is not going to happen. So I would recommend this board give qualitative and quantitative guidance to the superintendent so he can take it back to the administration and they can do the best effort in terms of finding efficiencies to at least get down to that 4% number, or let's just call it in the vicinity of last year's 4.5%, which is 4.5% would be a $2 million reduction off the pro formas with the mandated from the state.
I agree with the strategy. I do think we want to keep it fairly high level and focus on quantitative. And I do agree administration. I think we certainly can throw priorities out there, though administration needs to be the one to prioritize. Dave, go ahead.
Thanks. Just following up to the qualitative and quantitative, I'm just going to focus on the quantitative tonight. Rich, you gave us the spreadsheet on the past few years what the annual increases are. We get the 312. It looks like if we take out last year, we're trending around more like a 295. We're gonna get back on the 312. That gets us to a 305. So for me, with guidance from the Board of Finance of 4%, I would love to see us somewhere between 305 and 4% at the top end as per guidance. I don't want to have this delay other work that this board has to do through the year. So I can't see supporting any number above 4%. I don't see that as backing into the number at all. I just see that as comedy between boards and a recognition of whose statutory authority is in play. And the Board of Finance, we need to follow their guidance because they do have the ultimate say. So let's do this efficiently. Let's work within their guidelines and let's move forward.
I spoke to Greg and he had a similar strategy, which was that he recommended that we come in somewhere between the goalposts that the Board of Finance put forward. His feeling was that, and I agree with him, that the purpose of bringing forward guidance is not so that we can back into a number. It's so we can understand the implication of the number. And if the number puts us at a place that we feel isn't sustainable to us educationally or for any other reason, then we have a responsibility to bring that forward and advocate for that difference. So I think the purpose of providing guidance tonight is simply to give a starting point to the discussion. I'm fairly comfortable with coming in around or below last year, at least as a starting point, although I think that we need to be prepared to defend coming down within the range at any given point. Last year's budget with empty bodies and it was hard to defend. This year, I think we need to be able to squeeze every possible drop out of it. So I would say that we start at or around where we were last year and come down from there. Robin.
I just given the fiscal constraints that we have, and again, I want to avoid the process that we did have last year where we voted on something and then it was rejected and then we had to spend the next 2 or 3 months trying to do something that we didn't anticipate. So I agree we need to take the fiscal responsibility, which is also part of the Board of Ed's mandate to come up with a budget. And I agree with John and Jill, I mean, all of you, that none of this is going to be easy given the magnitude of the rising costs. And I want to also just highlight that if you look at not the percentage increases, but the actual dollar increases over the past 6 years, the first highest cost is the healthcare and benefits. Secondly is teacher salaries. And third is special education. None of those really do we have significant control over given contractual obligations, healthcare and special education needs. And so none of these decisions are going to be easy. But what I would say is that I would want to start with the areas where we do have high dollars and highest growth, because if we're going to get to the amount of numbers in terms of a cut, essentially, which is what we're looking at here, we're not going to get there if we're taking $50,000 here and $100,000 there from student-facing clubs. So unfortunately, I think we really do need to take a look at class size, and I don't want to take away from students. My biggest priority is students and making sure that they get the academic learning and support that they need, especially after COVID. So that's a huge priority. That being said, I have to think that there are things that we could do potentially more operationally effectively within large departments, or potentially we could look at insourcing more things as opposed to outsourcing. And again, that takes a lot of work to think about, and it might be an upfront cost. But I think we also have to evaluate things like that as well. State mandates. I'd like to think that we could trim down and continue to do that work where we can slim down things that might not make as much sense for Darien and for our students. And I understand that there's state mandates, but there are costs that we have incurred over the past several years that I think we spent maybe more than what we needed to. So I think we should look at that. I would like to stay away from the really student facing kinds of things. And because the students coming out of COVID and in the name of mental health need to have the ability to have extracurricular activities and social activities where they can benefit from the non-academic parts of high school and that experience. So I think we need to be a little bit careful about that. Again, I mean, none of this is going to be easy, but I think we should probably start with where we were last year at 4.7 or whatever we came in last year, and at least to have an outline for Alan and the team to kind of come up with something. And then if we have to cut beyond that, then we'll have to do that. But again, our number one priority, well, it's fiscal, but it's also meeting student needs. And so I want to make sure that we're being responsible in that. And if the needs, and we can't get there, then we'll have to have a tough conversation. But those are my thoughts.
Dave?
Just a follow-up question, if I may. Given the process last year, Robin, if we look to do 4.7 and the cap of our guidance is 4, how do you see that being an efficient
I
process?
think I'm not the only one on this table who is saying that. So there are 4 of us who've mentioned.
Well, I
that.
think,
No.
I think where I go from there is, I think fundamentally we have to be prepared to understand anything to a 4 or below. And so while we might say to Alan, this is your starting point, I think we need to understand the implications of going all the way down to a 4 or even a 3.5.
Or a 3.
Or a 3.
I'm just thinking, like, the point was made earlier about going back and having a couple month process and then coming back
Yeah.
and doing it again. My thought is if we start above the cap, how do we not wind up going through that process again?
Well, we'd have
Jill,
to
I don't
approve above the
know if you
cap.
can hear me. This is Sarah. I don't know
Yeah,
if you can
pop
see
in.
me.
Mhm.
So I think, in listening to the Board of Finance's conversation, their guidance was 3 to 4, but it was said, if my understanding is correct, that if there is a need to go above that, we just need to defend why we need to improve, why we need to go above that 4. So I will echo the around what last year's was. I also think that while, adjusting class size policy is uncomfortable. I do think it's something that we necessarily need to do so that we can either put the conversation to bed or move forward with different guidelines. So I would like to make a motion to have the policy subcommittee look into 6510 in the class size.
I'll second that. I hope that opens it for debate. Unless,
Can I just
yeah,
discuss what that means in terms
Yeah.
of, like, because the policy committee is going to review it, are they going to bring a recommendation back or?
yes, they would need to bring a recommendation back. But it would be based on something you put together.
I just process wise, that just seems.
Okay, well, what do you want to say? That we're in discussion part? Tell us.
I just feel as if, like, if we're gonna look at it, I'd like to put it on the table. If there's it seems like it should be a board decision at this point, as opposed to going back there, given time frames and so on and so forth.
Okay.
I mean, if it's increased by 1 student, well,
Do you have that leeway in the policy already?
I mean, to some degree I do, but I'm like, I'm being extra sensitive to, I don't want to dump that on the table and you go, oh, where'd that come from? The policy discussion didn't take place or all this, but I think that will hold up. Because we're also doing, like, we haven't even done the superintendent's budget process yet. We're in the middle of it, right? Just time wise, I think.
Okay.
I mean, what you're asking a subset of the board to go and say, you want to do this or not, and then bring that back. Well, listen, we're having that discussion here. Like, I mean, you know what I mean?
Okay.
It just seems a wee bit unnecessary. Eventually, that'd be a necessary
John?
step, but
Yeah.
Why don't we let him prioritize, create a budget? And if we have to change policy around that, we will, but we don't even
Okay.
know. I mean, again, tonight's goal is to create guidance, not come up with the solutions. The solutions come later. And we will have to, you know, if we come up with a budget that's greater than the guidance, then we're gonna have to defend it pretty vehemently and then be prepared to go through the revision process. So I would caution how high the superintendent comes beyond the guidance that the Board of Finance has given, and pretty explicitly too.
Okay, so there's a motion on the table, so we can let it fail, but I still have to call for a vote. So, and all in favor? Motion fails. Thank you. Okay. All right, so yes, Dave, go ahead.
Just to ask on process, are we taking a sense of the meeting or vote for different numbers, or how did you proceed at this time?
I think just a sense of the meeting, of where people want to come in. And I think similarly, sort of the guidance that I'm hearing more or less is at last year's or lower, with the understanding that the guidance was from 3 to 4. Although certain, at least the sweet spot was 3 to 4. So there's a need to defend anything from 3 up, or really anything. I think that was actually the bigger part of the guidance, was the entire process, which was that every tree needs to be shaken, and everything looked at. So I think we're hearing that initiatives, that really things have to be prioritized, and there may have to be trade-offs, and you know, you'll hold things flat where you can, and find efficiencies where you can. And if there's an area where you feel like there's growth is needed, if it can't be done with a trade-off, then we just have to defend it. So I think the number that I'm hearing is, like I said, last year's number or less. Katie?
Thank you. I'm in agreement with that. I would just say that additional guidance that's more qualitative. I don't see us as in a position to be adding new initiatives. That being said, I think that the exceptions are the middle school teen talk, which is in process. That would not be implementing a new initiative. It would be removing a currently used resource. So I personally would exclude that one from the elimination list, as well as the facility study, because I think that I think that can come with some unintended consequences as well.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
I'm not quite sure of the consensus. I would just echo again, I think Greg's between the goalposts sounds like a nice place to come down. Maybe the most efficient long-term, but we'll see how it develops.
Okay.
4.75 to 5. I do feel like I heard a different conversation in that room at the Board of Finance meeting. They definitely gave us an outline of what to do, but I did feel like there is room for us to determine what is needed for students and defend it.
Yes.
So to start all the way down at 3, it's very hard. I don't feel like that's what they told us to do.
Okay. Dennis?
Yeah, I'm a believer in, or I believe that giving guidance at where we were last year, and then it's the 9 of us job to bring it down to where the Board of Finance has suggested we come in, or not. But that's to ask the superintendent to come in, then why are we sitting here? To me, that's part of our job as well. And I also have a question to Alan. Is this giving you the guidance you need if we come in at last year's number to do your work for the next month?
well, if that's what the consensus is, right? I mean, if that's what the consensus is, yes, that's the guidance, and that's a work to bring what I think the district needs within that guidance.
Okay.
Okay. All right, you got it. Last year or less, Rich, you're on the case. You don't have to respond to that, other
No, I didn't
than
hear.
a
What was it? Was it a
fantastic.
question? Was it a question?
I said, no, it wasn't a question. I said, last year or less, Rich, you're on the case. All right. We have a lot of faith in you. Thank you all for the discussion. All right, follow-up action items. We talked about looking at the dashboard and the communication plan. Next meeting, we'll evaluate that against the agenda. We're taking a look at teen talk timing. For a future discussion, the timing of the SPED presentation. We're also looking at aspiring leaders. There's a couple of outstanding questions in each of the presentations. So I don't have all of those. There were some from the, I think.
We'll watch it again.
Yeah, okay, you guys will get that. Great. Okay. Anything else on the follow-up action items? Katie?
I did get a little bit of feedback from a couple of members on the board handbook. So thank you for those of you that weighed in. If anybody else has comments, please still send them in. And then Marge, just wanted to see if you had any guidance for us in concerning next steps on the legal aid.
Nope, Shipman has it and they're reviewing it. If there were any substantive changes, just let me know, or if they're in that link that I shared.
Yeah, I think that the specific guidance that we were looking for from them was the kind of missing element. So that was the main thing. And then you'll just reach out and let us know when we can, when they have something for us.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Do we have a sense of that timeline, March?
No, but I'll remind them.
Okay, thank you. All right, that I'll move to public comment. Thank you all.
Good evening. If anyone in person or online would like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium or use the raised hand icon and wait to be recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and address for the record and note that you have up to 3 minutes to comment.
I'm gonna do public comment again. A lot of complicated things. It seems like the new members of the board don't understand that the Board of Education is not subject to the Board of Finance. It's actually independent and it's supposed to report to the state. That is it. Now, please check on the responsibility of the board because that's the way it is, at the point that the Board of Education can even sue the Board of Finance to demand the budget. That's the way it works. Now, it's very problematic that there is not, I don't know if I have a miss because obviously I don't understand half of what is spoken, but there is not a whole lot of programs, new added programs to the kids, to the, to new times. Now regarding the board of the special needs, I'm very supportive to special needs. I'm very, very supportive. Every day I feel very blessed. My kids have friends that are special needs. I am very close to moms with special needs. I have never met a special needs in town that would be good to work in a store. Never. Not one of them. I tell you one thing further. I couldn't write until I was in second grade for whatever reason. And I was the valedictorian of my school when I graduated in high school. But I couldn't write my name in first grade. Now, some people have some skills and some people have other skills. Honestly, special needs skills are not customer service. In general, it isn't, So that we are gonna spend a fortune on educating kids that have special needs. And then now we are gonna add a program for them after they graduate to work in a retail store? No. What about if we explore what are those kids good for? Because I know a business in town that has been for 2 years trying to find a photographer and has not found one. And I can guarantee that a lot of the special needs in our school, if they had a chance to explore photography, they probably would be great photographers. My point is, why don't we explore what the kids with special needs want to do? What do they want to do? What do they dream with doing? Maybe, one of my daughter's special needs friends is great drawing. What about if we find a job for her that is great drawing, or he dreams with drawing, or something that is consistent with
Thank you
what
for your
they're good
time.
at?
Just a point of information for the board. We're actually a dual agency. We get our authority from the state to enact certain part of the statute. That's why we have line item veto, because it is our responsibility to take the educational priorities that are set forward from the state and apply the dollars to our own budget. But we get our taxes from the municipal base. So that's what makes us a dual agency. We get a fiscal appropriation from our town, but we get our authority on educational pieces from the state. There is a gap there. We do have pieces of our budget that are non-educational, so there is there's a odd relationship statutorily between the Board of Finance and the fiscal authority and us, where they can write us a letter and recommend that we make certain changes, like to our health insurance. And if we don't like it, we just write them a letter back. But that's actually the structure of the board, just for the record. Okay, with that, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, anybody else?
Oh, sorry, anyone on?
We have no raised hands at this time.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Dave, seconded by